Hi, it looks like it's just us on.
Yeah, I guess nobody else is here yet.
I know. What part of what Keller Williams are you a part of?
City side.
I'm sorry.
City side.
Oh, City Side.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with Buckhead.
Oh, Buckhead. Okay. How long you been doing it?
Nice. Since October.
Okay. You liking it?
Yep. So far, so good. I mean, it's kind of like I've had a few clients already, but one fell through, the other one can't make up their mind. My other two, they're looking for investment properties. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
It's trying to learn how to juggle all of that, right?
It's a lot. It's a lot. And I got a full-time job. So I'm like leaving work early.
Trying to meet up with them and stuff.
Yeah. But this class should be good though, because we're going to look at contracts. That's good.
Today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, nice to meet you.
All right. Same here. I know. I'll be back on. All right, man.
Hello, Janet Benford. Hello, Carol Brody. Hello, Selena Davis. I hadn't seen you. My little friends. Hi, Selena.
How are you?
Okay, Maria Charnecki. Maria? Oh, she's somewhere around. Okay, gang, I want you to know that our teacher today is one of my very good friends. She was my sponsor. I joined KW because of her. She also has been my realtor through most of my adult life, and that's how I came to be here. We've known each other BK before kids, and our kids are in their early 30s. We have done many funny things together, and we laugh and laugh, and her husband's a hoot too. They taught me just about everything I know. So you are learning from my teacher today, and we are glad to see everybody. Okay, Arje, Zahed Khan, wave Zahed, he's in our office. Selena Davis, wave, she's in our office. Carol Brody, wave, she's in our office. Candace Ebanks, she's in our office. Janet Benford, where'd you go, Janet? She's waving. She got a virtual background. Tanika Johnson, come on, Tanika, show us your pretty face. She's hiding.
No, I'm right here. Can you see me? I have the
Donnie Fox. Are you there? Wave to Donnie. Wave to Arje. He's in our office.
Hello, Stacey.
Sorry, I'm very partial
there.
to my peeps. Did Tanika? There she is. Wave. Okay, there's Tanika. She's a friend of Renita Crawley's. So, do we think everybody's here that is coming? Okay, Ashley, Enid, wait a minute, do I have two Ashley? Ashley Mitchell, Ashley Witt. Need to see the face so I can take the snapshot. Here we go, we're connecting. Oh, and Anthony Crawford, wave so Arje knows where you are. He's Toshma's friend. Okay, Enid, you're sideways. All right, Tanika, I got to take this picture.
It's so wild how we have to do things this time.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Enid.
Okay, I'll be glad to assist you.
Are we ready? Tanika, can you turn? Oh, there you are. There you are. You just got two. All right, groovy. All right, cheese. All righty.
And
so
may I start with your name?
Let me just. Yay. Okay.
Hi, may I start with
Perfecto.
your name?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, whoops, here we go. Did everybody get an email from me with lots of stuff? Sorry to bombard you all at once. I just didn't really have a handle on where y'all's emails were. But now I know who's at what market center, and those chapter summaries, I promise that you just study those before the final test, which will be Saturday, right after the last class. So 3:30-ish. It takes most people 20 to 30 minutes, 40 at the most. You're given an hour. It's 50 multiple choice. Got to get a 75 to pass. So,
Were we all supposed to get
great.
the email?
All right, Tatiana, I can't hear you, hun.
Were we all supposed to get the
Oh,
email?
my bad.
Oh.
Wait a minute. Hold on. My speakers were unplugged.
Yeah, were we all supposed to get the email?
Yes.
I don't think I got it.
Okay. If you would just put in the chat your email address,
Okay.
and I will send it on. So anybody that didn't get an email with tons of attachments, just pop it in the chat and I'll send it to you. And this is a super practical class today. This is what we do as realtors. We write contracts, we go under contract. So boom.
Stacy, I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you get me as being here, Maria Zarnecki? I'm making up this class. So
Yes, and I'm so glad, because I looked at my list and I thought, I don't have her name on my list. But are you at Peachtree Road?
yes.
Okay. Yes, Katie told me about you, and that is perfectly fine.
I just want to make sure that you know I'm here, so I'm getting credit for it.
Yes, no, I definitely could see your name. And
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Is anybody else a makeup person? Okay. Well, Mrs. McCarty,
All right.
you are, and you might want to change your name to add Arje McCarty. You know, do you 3
Yes.
dots?
Here we go. That way you got me.
Yes.
There you go. All right, everybody. Well, this is going to be strange for me because I don't sit down for 3 hours usually. So we're going to get through this. But this is my favorite. You know, all of this lead generation, and I hope everybody's using this time. We're in the holidays. We're in the best month of the year to lead generate. You just call and say hello, and somebody's telling you something about something. Even with COVID, actually, they're more liable to answer the phone. So I hope y'all are working on your databases and using the time, because after you get all the, you know, the contacts and the sphere and all of that, great time to reach out in January, Happy New Year and all of that. So then you start showing houses or listing houses, and then we get to the offer. And it is the time to put aside all of your ego. Oops, what happened? Oh, recording. Okay. So it is the time to put away all of your personal ego, even when you want to strangle somebody on the other end of the phone. If you've got an agent over there that's making it difficult, or a seller that's not doing what you want, or a buyer, or the other side. But it is the time that you're turning all the work you've done into why we do this. So anyway, I hope y'all have the overview. I'm going to go over most of that first, and then we'll try to be as interactive. So feel free to ask questions. When we get to the forms, I'm going to try to, normally we break into groups. We can't really do that well. So we'll try to work together, because if you start touching and feeling the forms, it's going to be a lot easier when it's time to really do one. Can I see a show of hands? How many of y'all have written offers or for either a buyer or had offers? Okay, so a number, good. Okay. And how many of y'all, just for curiosity, have been in the business, let's say less than 6 months? Okay, fantastic. So anyway, so what we're going to learn today is how to make an offer for a buyer, how to work with an offer with your sellers, and how to get through the negotiation. So we'll start from the beginning. The biggest thing to try to remember, and this is where if you've ever done any other kind of sales job, I always tell our buyers, this is where I actually start to sell. I don't sell you a house. I'm with you to find a house, but this is where I'm putting together your offer to sell you and your offer to the seller. And it's a big financial decision. It's an emotional decision. So as I said, if you sold anything else, you know, cars, computers, there's not as much emotion involved because this is a home and this is a home that someone is selling. And of course, let's have a little participation. So what do you think that buyers and sellers, what do you think sellers think about the worth of their house? Are they usually right on target?
They seem to always think it's worth more than the market says.
Exactly. And their kitchen's better than the other one. And oh my gosh, I've done all the maintenance. It's fantastic. So yes. And the buyer, what do you think they think of any given? It doesn't matter what house, unless it's a bidding war. Sometimes they'll get excited, but usually any buyer without any information, what do you think most of them think? The house they love is?
Well, they think there's always room. Yeah, they think there's room for negotiation to go down, usually, maybe not in this current market. But also I was going to say that the sellers usually also think that all of their upgrades that they put in custom for themselves will get returned to them when they sell. And it really seems like a lot of times those extra special things that the owners put in doesn't hold its value. Only some do.
Right, exactly. And that's a very hard part, which you've talked about the listing, and you'll talk about it more as well, is trying to help that seller get through it. So this is when we actually get into the work of real estate. And, you know, the biggest part is to get the leads, to have the buyers and the sellers, but then now we're actually doing the business of real estate. So let's start on the buyer side. And I did see a question just come through, and I'll try to keep up with the chat, but somebody asked, there's a summary sheet, which is key terms. It's about 3 or 4 pages long. And that is, Stacy's giving you a huge hint to study those, because the other one was 51 pages long, and I'm going to look at it once in a while to be sure I don't miss something. But the 3 or 4 pages is the summary.
They do. The recall and remember are definitely included, but y'all, I went question by question through the test and made sure I said something to let you know what the answer is on these chapter summaries. So
study those.
Hey, and you don't have to use it. It's my gift to you.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're so welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so you see a house and you like it, or the buyer likes it, and so they say, I want to make an offer. So what is the first thing you do? Anyone have a thought as the buyer's agent?
Contact the listing agent.
Perfect. Don't do one thing until you call that agent. And texting is a great thing to do. And I have done a lot of negotiating with texting, but this is the time to use your voice. I am telling you, call them, because you will learn a lot more. Even if it's active in the computer, they could have an offer working, or they could actually be under contract. So don't waste your time or the agony your buyer might go through. So pick up the phone and call the agent. The best thing to do is to try to chat with them, even if it's an old listing that's been around a while, or even if it's a hot listing that just came on. Try to find out what's important to the seller. Now, some things you won't want to give them, but closing date, do they need to stay in the house a certain amount of time, or it would make their life easier? Things, maybe your buyer has a 2-month, they have to give their apartment 2 months notice. So there's some things you can give for free, or the buyer could consider giving for free. So if you get the information, I just start asking, so, hey, tell me about such and such. Have you had, and then ask questions like, have you had any offers? Why are they moving? Okay, someone's still trying to look for the chapter summaries. Well, we'll get that email to you. Okay. You don't need them right this instant, but before the test, you'll want them. So anyway, back to the buyer. So you're going to try to chat with the agent. I always try to be friendly with them so they like me too. You know, not adversarial. Even if you're going to come in with a low offer or something like that, you're trying to gather information. And if you can find out something about the seller that you could put in your offer, that will be very helpful. The other thing I do is I tell the buyer to immediately call their lender. And if it's your lender, you could also communicate, but give the buyer something to do while you're doing everything else. And you need a letter of loan approval. You might want to make the letter for around the same, or for the offer price, because of course everybody knows somebody has more money, but you don't want to give away if you have $50,000 more for some reason. Some sellers might go, well, look at this, they have more money, even though that doesn't mean they'll pay more. So get a letter from the lender. This is where the lender is very important, especially in a multiple contract, really any contract. And then from the lender, you need to know how long do they need for an appraisal? How long would they need for the financing contingency? So to get the loan completely approved. And then how long do they need for closing? You also will want to get the interest rate, and you need to know, of course, what percentage down the buyer is putting down. So start gathering, have them gather that information for you. So what else do you need to know about the house before you make an offer? Anybody have an idea what you can find usually on FMLS, or might have to email the listing agent?
Property disclosure, if they have one.
Absolutely. Property disclosure, very important. And it's also important to find out if it's an estate or an investor. They might say they don't have one, but usually there is one. All right. And then if it is in any sort of neighborhood, the other thing you'll want to look at is the community disclosure. And we're going to look a little bit at these forms as we go. So the community disclosure is where they tell you if there's a fee to live there, whether it's annual or monthly, like in a condo, you have a monthly fee. And it tells you if there's any sort of initiation fee. So that's important for the buyer to know. I always try to get those documents as soon as possible. And as a listing agent, I want the buyer to have it before we start negotiating, because sometimes, you know, if there's an old roof or something, they'll go, oh, I didn't know this when I made my offer. So as a seller, I'm really pushing on my listings. I almost tell them I will not go in FMLS until you have me the seller's disclosure. I say, I need it before we go live. Now, will I let somebody slip maybe for 24 hours, but you really want it. I really push that and just kind of say, I have to have it, because then you don't have a problem that the buyer sees something that would make them offer less, or they say that it would. Okay, the other thing that is important to do as a buyer's agent is you can email. Now, in our case, at my office, we email Ganic PC, which is the closing attorney that is our vendor. In your other offices, you may also have a vendor, and those closing attorneys that you have a relationship with will pull the title search, not title search, but they can pull the actual legal description for you. And at Ganic, if I email Brandy, I'll say, I don't need this till the morning or whatever. I mean, I have it. It doesn't matter if it's Sunday night. I'll say, don't look at this till tomorrow, unless it's an offer. But she's very quick at getting that for us. Now, sometimes the listing agent will have it for you. If you can't get the legal description, you can fill in what you know on the purchase and sale, but it's always good to have the legal description, because then you know you're describing the right house. And it talks about land lots and districts and things like that. And it's the best way if you can get it, and you should. Now, if you're in a bidding war and you need to get an offer in, I have gone without it. And then I'll do an amendment later just to say, here's the legal description when I get it from my closing attorney. So as you said, the buyer is in this place of, I want a house with no defects, totally updated for the price of the fixer upper. I mean, that's just, they think that way. And sellers think their house is worth more than their neighbors. And so we're trying to get these two together. And the first offer, hopefully everybody does a buyer's consultation. Hopefully, one thing we do as we show houses is spend time kind of talking about, well, I know you don't like this house, but if we were to make an offer, to try to kind of get them familiar with what's going to happen. I also strongly advise in that buyer's consultation, and half of them will not look at it until the moment they need it, but be sure that they have seen a purchase and sale. And that way they've at least seen it. The other thing is, you should be getting a buyer's agency signed for your own protection somewhere along the way, either at the consultation, or sometimes I'll wait, one showing so they get to know us, and then I say, let's sign it. If for some reason I don't have a buyer's agency in the file, so like say it's somebody I've sold a house to 3 times and I just didn't get the paperwork, which is the wrong way to do it. But if I haven't, this is when I get it, when I'm making the offer, because otherwise it won't be in the file. You won't get paid. Your broker will flag it. So with the offer, let me just be sure we're going over everything. With the offer, you also should try to, from your conversation with the listing agent, you'll get a feel for who the seller is. And so you will also want to talk strategy with the buyer of how to do this. And sometimes coming in higher and then maybe don't come up as much is a better strategy than coming in low, because then you insult them and they don't even want to sell you the house for any amount of money because they get mad, because it is their home. It's not, a computer or, some other product. It is their home. So now you have to, present whatever your buyer says, and some buyers have to lose a house or something like that to get it, but just try to counsel them in a very nice way that this is a transaction. And the nice thing is we are buyer's agents, so you can know what they want to pay for the house. And you don't have to, you're working for them. And so you can strategize together on how do you want to what is the strategy? If they are a buyer in a lease and they can give the seller let's say you see it's a young family with lots of kids, you could give them an extra month to get out, or whatever. You can give them a date they need. That could be worth a lot. And somebody that can't do that would have to pay more. You'll also need to know how they're going to pay for the house. I am assuming that most people are getting a loan, even people that could pay cash. The rates are so low. Most people are getting a loan. So that's why you need that lender letter. If, let's go to the other, if they're not getting a loan, you have to attach a cash exhibit. So you either have cash or some sort of loan exhibit. And there's 3 loan exhibits, FHA, VA. So
Oops, I forgot the cash exhibit. Sorry.
that's okay. Don't need, we don't need it. Or conventional loan. So you're either a loan or you're cash, and you have to have one or the other. So if somebody is cash, we don't just necessarily believe them. They will have to start working on getting a proof of funds, which shows that somebody at their bank gives them a letter saying the money's there, or some people have a statement that they can white out the numbers and show the amount is there. So that's something that they can also be working on. Time is of the essence, and your job as a buyer's agent is to protect your buyer's earnest money. They're going to be putting earnest money down, which is, there are mainly three contingencies in the contract. The due diligence, which is for the inspection, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The appraisal, whether cash or not cash or loan, you can have an appraisal contingency. And then if there's a loan, you have a financing contingency. So those are the main 3. Now, sometimes the buyer might have a house to sell, although that's hard in this market to get somebody to take it. Sometimes they'll have a house to close, which is a lot easier to have. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So anyway, so those are the main contingencies. And so they can get their earnest money back if something goes on in the inspection or during the due diligence. They can get their money back if the appraisal comes in low and the seller won't work with them. And they can get their money back if they don't get the loan. Now, you don't want to do all this for them not to get the loan, so be sure they're working with a good lender and you're very comfortable that they've done everything they need to. But still, if something were to happen. And like I said, your job is to protect the earnest money. Okay, so let's see. Now, the other thing we do with our buyers is we do a CMA, just like you do for your sellers. And we tell them during the buyer consultation that we're going to be doing this. And so we send them a link, from FMLS with the comparables, as well as a printed report. I usually make it a PDF. And then they can see the comparables, because some houses, I always tell them it doesn't matter what the list price is. It's what do we think it's worth? And you can have a conversation about square footage, number of bedrooms, number of baths, updates. You can look at the pictures of the houses, and I send it to them and let them mull it over. And then I usually go over it with them and talk about, well, first I ask them what they're going to offer. And if it seems like they've got it, I might not spend as much time on the market analysis unless they want me to. But if they're coming in really, really low, you might want to spend some time just saying, well, this is, look at this, and don't, maybe there's a house that's very similar or what have you. And you can have an open conversation with them about the price. And it's not so much, some houses are going to go for full price. Some houses in a bidding war might go over price, and some houses are going to negotiate quite a bit.
I got a quick question about that CMA for the buyer. With houses being sold as quick as they are right now, do you have time to do that? Okay, so it depends. Yeah, so if they know, or it's in neighborhoods they really know, you might start the offer and then look at the comparables. I mean, or multiple offers has created a whole different thing, Anthony.
So yes, you might just jump into the fray if you've got a buyer that's comfortable with that. The biggest thing you want to do is figure out, like if your buyer's a first-time buyer and this is their first offer, you know, they'll get more and more comfortable. I have a closing tomorrow. I don't know what I'll do when it's so, because we lost a lot of houses. We've been looking for a long time, and she had to learn that she wanted to use Bank of America because that's where her checking account was. And we lost houses because of that choice, because the lender did not answer on a Sunday afternoon when I needed to get in a bidding war. They didn't call like my lender and say, hey, I've already done this loan, we're ready. You know, they didn't do short appraisals. They didn't do short contingencies. So we lost a lot of houses, and then we tried to buy a house. It needed some work. And so we had to get out of that house because the seller would not help at all. Anyway, so we've been through a lot, and so tomorrow's a big celebration for that one because of just what she went through. But at first, Anthony, she couldn't make an offer until I'd done all that. But then, like you said, by the second and third time, she goes, I know what I want to offer. Let's do it. So look to them. And then even after, in the other ones, if I was making an offer, I would go ahead and do it after I got the offer started, because maybe the highest and best wasn't until the next day, but I get her offer there, but then I, talk to her. The other thing that you can decide what to do in your consultation, you can start talking about multiple offers and regular offers or if you're in a multiple offer, that actually is a time to tell them, even if you're getting a loan, these are all bold things to do, but they could come in as an all cash, like it's not contingent on the loan. They could come in with no appraisal contingency. I mean, there's things you can do if you're really strong and you feel like it would work. So you can start talking about some of those things as you learn them in we talk about it in office meetings and things like that. But one other thing you can decide whether to do, and I've actually used it on non-multiple offers once in a while, depending on the situation. So this is when we put on our psychology hat, which I think I have on 98% of the time, is would a letter from the buyer help the situation? So if you're in multiple contracts, if you're dealing with a relocation company and it's a corporation, they don't really care about a nice little letter. If it's a couple that's lived in their house for 30, 40 years, they might really like to know that this person loves their house. If you're in multiple offer, it could help because it sounds like, and that's where the buyer can show some emotion for why they love the house. Now, a letter, there's one time a letter does not work, and in fact is a complete negative. Can anyone guess what that would be?
When it violates fair housing?
Oh, well, I guess so. Yes, that would be one. What I'm saying is a letter, when you make a really low ball offer, but write a letter, you come in 50,000 under list price, but write a letter saying how much you love, that they maintained the house so well, it kind of doesn't work, because then you're insulting, so wait a minute, you say you love my house. But yes, you don't want to do anything against fair housing. It's more to for the buyer to say, it's become so impersonal, and buyers and sellers don't meet each other a lot of times. And it's more that you're humanizing the buyer if they want to be humanized. Like this girl tomorrow that we're closing, she is not kind of I call them sappy letters, but you know what I'm saying. They're nice letters. It was hard for her to write a letter. So I actually wrote a cover sheet that said, and I was not talking about I said that it was her first home. And I said that she had a great job at a major corporation. And, like I wanted them to feel comfortable with her ability, that even though she was a first time buyer. And I wrote it because I knew that this seller had bought the house. It was their first house. So I kind of modeled it to who the seller was. And like I said, if it's a corporation, you don't need a letter. But if it's something that would be helpful, I had an investor that we made an offer on an estate, and we wrote a letter saying that we wanted to care for this house because my particular investor doesn't do 20 a year. She does like, 3 or 4. And so we said something in the letter about trying to take care of the parents' home and just make it new. I forget our wording, a very kind word for update it, with the love we could tell was spent there. I mean, so again, it's not anything. It's just maybe if that is warranted, if that seems like someone would care, it can help you get a house. It just makes them feel like you're human and you're not just being insulting. The other things as you're getting your offer ready is, what other things do you need to put in stipulations? And so do you want a home warranty? Do you want a termite bond? Is there anything you want to put in it? And again, if you're multiple offer, you might do what we call a clean offer and put none of that in there. You can do a termite inspection during the inspection phase and whatever, if you're worried about termites. But when it's been on the market a while, you might have more of a tendency, or if the appliances or the heating and air are older, then you might put a home warranty in it. It's always a good thing, but you can add it later, or in the, they could buy one if they really wanted it. What else might you put in that offer? Well, let's look a little bit, I think, at the actual contract, so we can kind of answer questions as we go. So do you all have, I'm hoping, a copy of the contract in your email from Stacy, or you've seen it?
Everybody better say yes.
Because this is where, especially if like for instance, the new 2021 contract is out, and I glanced at it, but we all have a tendency to not really glance at it until we need it. So all of a sudden I'll be writing an offer and I might be actually reading all the changes. We're going to look at the 2020 because there's not that many changes, and it's watermarked still, the new contract, but do look at it. Someone just asked a question on the chat.
She asked if we could do
Yes,
a real offer.
that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so with Zoom, I can't see all of your hands, so just jump in. So the first thing to say about the contract is page 1 is key, with page 7 and 8, really 7, those are where most of the terms are going to be. The in-between part is explaining what happens if, or what does this mean. So try very much get to know this contract. It is your friend. It was written by lawyers and brokers. I am in, Ryan, I am on looking at the purchase and sale agreement for Georgia that Stacy emailed out.
And let me just answer Layla's question. She was asking, can you ask for a termite bond on an as-is property? You can ask for anything. I'll let Arje answer whether it's realistic that they will come through. But don't hesitate to ask. You never know. If a seller has they don't want to make repairs, but they really have a lot of pride of ownership of their house. You never know. They might fix something. Would you agree, Arje?
I totally agree. People say in a offer, counter offer, this is my final offer. That does not always mean this is my final offer. They can say this is an as-is sale. I'm not fixing anything. I have never had, I mean, like buyers always ask for it anyway. If it's an estate, again, it depends if you're in multiple offers. If you're in multiple offers, you don't want to be the cranky one asking for a bunch of stuff. If they say as is, we don't want to do anything, you can say, well, because of the age of the appliances, from what we could tell before we do our inspection or whatever, we would like to ask for a home warranty. You can ask for anything. And part of asking is how you ask. And that's where I said at the beginning, this is where we put our ego aside, and the smartest, best, most successful agent does not have to let you know that they think they're the best. So just like, if your buyer really wants something or needs something to feel comfortable, you can just think how to say it to the listing agent. I know you said as is, but I have to tell you, we found in the inspection, blah, 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 and we just don't have it budgeted. We do not want to walk from this house. We need your help with such and such. Or we really need a home warranty because everything's so old and we just want to put 20% down, and we're not asking this to be, we're not asking this to be insulting. We're asking this for this reason. And it's, again, the way you ask and the way you conduct yourself that can really help. I will tell you, with a foreclosure one time, there was an electrical problem, and foreclosures are always sold as is. And I went back to the bank and I said, here we are, but this is electrical and it could cause a fire. So we're asking you for something. And they screamed and yelled. And then I got the lender to completely get the person approved. And I went back again and asked for a couple $1,000s. So, I mean, you can always never say never. So definitely do that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Well, what happens when the seller has stated in the remarks that they won't have anything turned on to do like an inspection? Do you then have to go and get like some type of temporary something to turn things on?
So they said they won't let you have an inspection?
No, basically they won't turn on like any of the utilities, like nothing.
Oh, yes, you can. It's a real pain in the neck. I mean, not really. I mean, it's just calls. You can have it put on. I remember when we had a lot of foreclosures, we had to do that.
And it goes into that buyer's name?
Yes, and they have to pay fees to turn it on, $50 here and there. You don't see that often anymore or lately, but who knows in the future. But yes, you can. And then what I normally do is, because they'll have to pay $50 or something, whatever the processing fee is, or, to turn it on, you could just leave it on in their name if you think they're really going to buy it, or else turn it off. It is possible. Yes.
RJ, I have another question for you. So with houses going into multiple offers, best and final, and frequently going over asking price, with your buyer's loan approval, is it wise to maybe attempt to have them approved for maybe 1% over the asking price just to be safe?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then you can decide what you want to you can decide what you want the letter to say, but yes.
Thanks.
You'd want your letter to match your offer. Now, this would be the one time if it was multiple offer and you were doing an escalation clause, or you were willing to pay anything or whatever, you could maybe show that they could afford more. You can always show that. I'm just saying, if I'm trying to negotiate something down, I might not want to let them know I had 20,000 more, the buyer. But yes, you would want to make it high.
Can we go over escalation clause?
Yeah, how about this? Let's go over the contract, and then I'll show you what you can do to improve an offer. How's that? Or as we go through the things, I'll say, now, if you're multiple offer, you could do this. How's that? Okay.
So just really quick to go back to that utilities, are there any contingencies that you would put in that offer to protect that buyer?
Okay, say that again. I'm sorry.
Back to the utilities, as far as the utilities not being turned on and it has to go in the buyer's name, what type of contingencies would you put in that to protect the buyer?
I've never, I've done it before where I had to turn it on. I don't know that you need, I just would put something about, I would consult with my broker specifically, because that's not going to happen that often. It's obviously happening now to you, but I would put something in a contingency of some sort, not a contingency, but just all parties acknowledge that the buyer is going to put utilities on in their name to be able to perform an inspection. Because you can't perform an inspection with no electricity.
Okay, thank you.
Something like that, yeah. Okay, so let's get out the purchase and sale, which looks like this. I would do it on the screen, but then I can't see anybody. So get out your purchase and sale. This is the form you're going to use in every single offer 99% of the time. New construction would be similar, and sometimes your builders have their own, but this is the bread and butter offer. So you see the offer date. Now, when you do the offer, and you can use any of the systems, whether it's Remine or DocuSign, you'll see that on all the exhibits, there's a place to put the offer date. So just be sure that all matches. Yes, you can get a temporary hookup. That's what, yes. For the utilities, for that last question. So just make sure the offer date matches with all your exhibits when we get to exhibits. So the first place is the purchase and sale, and is discussing what the heck are we buying. That is where you'll put in the address. You'll want to have an MLS number. It can be FMLS, but it's whichever one you're using, which most of it's FMLS. And I always do, okay, so let's talk about this. When I'm writing an offer, I pull up FMLS and I pull up the house, because I'm going to use that many times. So I'm going to cut and paste the address. I'm going to cut and paste the MLS number. And I'm also going to go and cut and paste the tax ID. And again, it just saves me time. And it also, I don't make a typo by transposing numbers. Then paragraph B is legal description. And that's where it'd be fantastic if you have number 1 attached as an exhibit, because then we know we got the right house. Now, interestingly enough, look at that legal description. I think once in my life, but once is enough. Somehow the name was wrong. And we found out that something just had been recorded improperly. So we just had a little bit of heads up. So just look at it and see if it makes sense. You got the condominium exhibit. You've also got other ways to fill it in, deed book and page, or land lot, district, and that you get also from FMLS. Now, some agents fill it in and some don't. But that's where, if you can, you don't check all 4 boxes, you just check 1. Can you do a screen share of the form? Stacy, can you do a screen share of the form? They are in your email that you could pull up. I don't have them pulled up, and I hate to take the time to go find it and pull it up for you. Let me see. Stacy, are you there?
I'm
Okay.
talking to you, but
Great. Okay, perfect. Okay, good. So can I just push through this form, or you're? Okay. All right.
Well, I didn't share. Audra Plummer is sharing this.
Okay.
Oh, thank you,
okay.
Audra.
Perfect, Audra. So you just move it along as we get there. That's great. Okay, so you see where the legal description, and the main thing you want is number 1, if you can. Now, people were talking about being in a multiple contract. And like I said, you don't have time for Ganic or whoever you use to send you a legal. So you can fill in number 3 or 4 or 2 if you're a condo with whatever you can get out of FMLS. Worst case, and let's not spend time on the things that happen. Worst case, you can go into the tax records and at least get your land lot and your district, because some of that will be there. So that's the legal description. Now the big thing is the purchase of the property, number 2. And that is where the price is so important. And that's where you're going to counsel your buyer, and, you know, don't ever tell them what to do, but let them know, you know, why a certain strategy might not work. Coming in too low might just be too much. As I told you, when we get to, we'll just fly through, I guess, but the descriptions of all these things are in page 2, 3, 4, and 5. Closing costs is the next question to ask your buyer. What closing costs? Do they want to pay their own closing costs, or do they want the seller to pay it? So let's say you're making an offer of $300,000. It would be the same as an offer of $305 with the seller paying $5. Do you see the math? So if you thought the house would appraise for $305 and you wanted to keep the $5,000 for moving expenses, for paint, for carpet, for just whatever, or to have more money for your down payment, you just need to counsel the buyer that if they make an offer of $305 with $5,000 in seller paid closing costs, that's the same as $305 minus $5 or $300. So it doesn't really matter to the seller. Normally, it matters what their net is, and that's all they care about. So they're going to look at purchase price minus sellers minus home warranties or anything else you ask for. So just try to find out what's the most important to your buyer as they're making choices. If you're in a bidding war, you're going to want to think also about, if you have to go over list price, if you let's say had 10,000 in closing costs and your price was really high, it might not appraise, and the seller's going to be worried about that. So they might not pick you, even though you offered more, because you got that 10,000 in there. It's too high of a price. They might be nervous. Does that make sense? Next thing is closing date and possession. And this is fantastic with the purple. This is where your conversations with the buyers, the listing agent, is so important. So a lot of people want possession at closing. They're nervous that the movers might hit a wall, or they're nervous. Some people come from other states where they've never heard of possession after closing, where the closing happens tomorrow and the seller moves out by Friday. Personally, I do a lot of our listing work. I don't like my sellers to move until I have the money in my hands, or they have the money, because sometimes there's a delay and then they're paying storage on their stuff, or they can't get in their new house or whatever. So I usually try to get a couple of days after closing. If you do anything like that after closing, you have to fill out, you'll see there at the end, you have to have a temporary occupancy that says this isn't a lease.
Yeah.
We're just staying, even if
they look straight.
Hello? Someone asking a question? Nope. Okay, so that's where you're going to fill that out. And it just is basically stating that it has to be in the same condition except for normal wear and tear. So if a moving truck backs into the garage door, you got to get it fixed or have the moving company get it fixed. You know, whatever is as the seller now, person staying afterwards.
Arje,
Yes, please do.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you a quick question? This actually happened to my personal home, the one I'm in. I had Friday closing. I think it was like 3 p.m. or something like that. And we did a walkthrough the day before. Everything looked great. And so that was Thursday. And then on Friday, we went to close, exchanged keys, you know, had a good old time. And then we walked out with keys. And then when I went into the house afterwards, like Friday around 5 o'clock, I noticed that the movers had scratched the floor quite a bit. And it created all this havoc. How would you recommend navigating that situation?
So that's the agents that have had something like that happen to them. That's why they don't like possession after closing. Because it's hard to, you know, how do we prove it? You know, but you just have to take it a situation at a time and like ask the seller, you know, say, hey, this is what's happened, take pictures, send it, you know, and I start with a kind way. Hey, I just wanted to point this out. Can you work with me on with the movers? Because their insurance should cover it. I take a very high road approach, but you do have, hopefully someone would have a temporary occupancy and it states that it's supposed to be in the same condition as, you know, as at the walkthrough. It's hard to prove. So I mean, like you could have it hard to prove, and some moving companies want everybody to be happy, and so they'll work with you. So that's a tough one. It is a tough one.
Okay, thanks.
Like I said, another way, since we're talking about bidding wars as we're going, you know, if the seller, you know, was trying to get into another house for themselves, giving them, I mean, I've given as much as a month after closing for possession. Now, again, you might not be comfortable with it, but it has worked out before. You know, it could be a way to get a house. If your buyer can do that or is in a lease, or they want to close sooner, but they want, you know, to get some, and a lot of times you can actually have the seller pay for that month. So it's all dependent. Every contract is worth what the people in it are like, you know. So sometimes a very simple problem gets blown up, and sometimes something that could be horrible is calm, and it just depends on the people. So Ryan, I don't know what happened with you, but you know, sometimes like if it was my seller and they used my mover, it would be a lot smoother, because I could probably call the guy at the moving company and say, hey, I need you to come over here. These are fresh scratches, or you know what I mean? Whereas, or if it's some, you know, mover off the internet, you might not get anywhere. And the seller might say, well, those were there before, or whatever. And some sellers, you know, will go out of their way. And some sellers, it all depends on the individuals.
Yeah, we had heard from the neighbors on both sides that she wasn't a very nice lady, because we never met the seller ever. And she had the house staged, and it wasn't a lot of furniture. So when we did our final walkthrough the day before, you know, it was just a couch here and there and then a couple beds, but they were enough deep gouges in the floor that we made a kind of a stink about it.
Well, hopefully you got something, I hope.
Yeah, they threw money at us. We took it.
Okay, good. Yeah, so it really does depend on the people. And like I said, possession after closing, I have done that a lot of times where someone's moving out of state, or I just like to have because of the delays I've seen, I, as a listing agent, like to have a few days afterwards, and have not had too many problems over the years, but that's the debate. Sometimes, so you'll have an agent like Ryan, you might, I'm not picking on you, but you might not like possession after closing because of what happened to you, or what happened on the last deal, or what have you. But that's where you just have to talk to your seller or your buyer, or whichever side you're talking to, and say, look, this really is upsetting to the seller. to do possession, or they really want possession. This is why. Are you willing to give it to them if your buyer doesn't want to? Or, you know, vice versa with the seller. Say, well, if you're moving anyway and you're not worried about it, then we can give them possession at closing. So it's something, every line on page 1, think of it this way. Every line on page 1 can be negotiated, and some are more important in different transactions, depending who the people are and what matters, you know, to them. So if, you know, don't be the one fighting. Like, my personal preference is my sellers don't move till they have their money. But if the seller says, I'm moving anyway because I don't want to move that week, then let it go, because it's not you. But just give them counsel and then let them make a choice for them. Earnest money. So does anybody know what kind of the standard, not standard, but what is the kind of typical earnest money in Atlanta?
1%.
1%.
Perfect. Yep, 1%. So here's a way in a multiple contract that you can look better, is to do more earnest money. Now, you got a way to get out of it or get it back if the house is a wreck or whatever, or it doesn't appraise, but you could offer substantially more here in your offer. And you get it all back unless you as a buyer default and just don't show up at the closing. And you know, the due diligence is fine, the appraisal is fine, the financing is fine, and you just decide not to close, you can lose that earnest money by defaulting. So that's a place in a multiple offer that you could consider. A couple things on earnest money. That is one place that's changing on the new contract. They're going to allow for an ACH, which is just another little field. How is the earnest money getting there? Check, cash, wire transfer, or ACH is now it's going to say. If you check box A, we used to always get the check back in the day when we weren't doing any kind of wires or whatever, or we were with our buyers and not doing a lot of it virtually. If you say you have the money as of the offer date, even if you have the check in your hand, technically it is supposed to be at your office. I found out, and Lynn LaCroix laughed at me because I'd been doing it so long. So I never checked that box because I probably am not at the office with this check. So I normally check B, and I normally put, depending, again, this is a number that can float. If it's a normal offer and I don't have to look too slick or, you know, trying to get everything perfect, I will put it at 5 days to give me time to get it, because maybe I'm going to have the inspection, depending where, now if the buyer's right around the corner or the buyer's job is such that we can meet, you know, somewhere at lunchtime or whatever, just put that 3 to 5 days. Anything more than that seems a little suspicious. I mean, it can be anything. C, I've never used, but that, I don't know what you put there. I guess I don't know if there was some other situation. Okay, so earnest money, again, when you go,
Arje?
Yeah.
Just quick question. So the check is made out to so I'm Keller Williams Buckhead. So the check is made out to Keller Williams Buckhead.
Yes.
So then it's up to me to take it to Keller Williams Buckhead, or is it up to the buyer?
You.
Okay.
I mean, now some of your buyers might drive it by and drop it off.
Okay, so either or would work.
Yes.
But you should check with your MCA and find out what your office protocols are. There are many ways to skin this cat. They do not let your buyers send anything in the US mail.
No.
FedEx, if they must, because they could be out of town, but check with your MCA and see how they want it to be.
Okay.
Ultimately, it's your responsibility to make sure it happens. Right, Arje?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I have a question of RJ and Stacy. Well, just clarification. So with the earnest money, the client makes it payable to our office?
Yes.
Keller Williams, Atlanta
And-
perimeter.
Okay. Why not the closing attorney?
I'm going to talk about that in just a second, because we want to hold, you would, as Keller Williams, you want to hold that earnest money, because then you're in charge. I'm going to tell you that this in just a second. You're having a lot of conversations right now on the chat about wires. So I know that our offices are talking more about wires because a lot of people don't even use checks anymore. Just talk to your MCA about wires and what a charge is for it. Wires, I know our office has not liked wires right now, but we know we've got to do it more because so many people don't have checks. So just talk to your MCA about how to do wires and if there's a charge for it, because it depends on the bank and everything else. And again, this new ACH is going to be another option, but we'll decide what each office can handle and do so that we can take their money as best, the best way. Now, I think I'm going to, rather than go through so I'm going to refer a little bit on page 3. If you want to just, we don't have to go over there. Well, just so look and see, this is an important one. So go to page 3 just to show them. So here's this whole paragraph about earnest money. And this is where it talks about what happens to this earnest money. And so while I might go over, all these things with the buyer, the earnest money is one of the most important things, because technically they put it down $5,000 in earnest money and they get the $5,000 at the closing. They don't get a check back. It's actually on their closing statement as a credit. So if they paid that $305, it happens to be the same number as what we were asking for in closing costs, but they did $5,000 in closing costs, they would get a credit on their closing statement for the earnest money. And the earnest money would be normally taken out of your commission, not out of your commission, but just like, let's say you were supposed to get $10,000 and there was $5,000 in earnest money. You'd bring a check back to the office for $5,000. And then the other $5,000 is at the office in the form of earnest money. So it just kind of stays there instead of filtering it back and forth. If for some reason the earnest money was more than your commission, then you would have to bring a check from your MCA. That doesn't happen that often because usually earnest money is 1% and you're making 3%. But this is where it describes what happens if and how they can lose their earnest money by defaulting. And just, I always make sure that they know that paragraph's there. In my conversations with them at the buyer's consultation and then maybe as they're making the offer. So they shouldn't lose their earnest money. They're in charge of whether they lose their earnest money. They have to willingly default. Somebody just asked, good question about, and I'm seeing it more this year than before. If you don't mind going back to page 1. Thank you so much. This is fantastic. It says, oh, I'm sorry, holder of earnest money above. I realize I skipped that. That's where it talks about who's holding the earnest money. And most of us would fill in Keller Williams, Peachtree Road, First Atlanta perimeter. Keller Williams likes to hold the earnest money. We have earnest money accounts. We know how to handle it. And then we are in charge of what happens to it. If there is a dispute, Lynn LaCroix or whoever your broker might be, if it's not Lynn, would be helpful in keeping that earnest money for your buyer or your seller or whoever. Well, normally you just hold it if you're the buyer. There's a place there that says if holder is closing attorney, F510 must be attached. Some companies not Keller Williams, but some companies don't want to go through the rigmarole of handling earnest money because there's a lot of scrutinizing of that earnest money account, and you have to do it correctly, which we do it correctly. And they ask for you to hold, for the closing attorney to hold the earnest money. As a listing agent, I don't love this. I usually try to be sure if they just don't have a way to hold it, I will sometimes say, well, I can hold it for you. If it's a big name firm, I might be okay with this, but you do have to have this extra F10. And the reason that this could be interesting is that I did have some money held by a closing attorney, and the money was in Florida. Unbeknownst to us, their address was Atlanta, but then they really were in Florida. And so they didn't have to really follow. They got lawyery on us. It turned out, but it wasn't a good thing. So now I really don't like it. Again, like Ryan doesn't like possession after closing. I don't like closing attorneys holding earnest money, but I've had many successful. Palmer House doesn't normally have, they don't like to hold earnest money. They don't have it set up properly, and so forth and so on. So I just make sure, I always offer to hold it for them. And if not, I make sure this F10 and F11, there's 2 extra forms that need to be filled out during the transaction. Number 6 is where you fill in your closing attorney. And that is where, oh, I love this. In FMLS, you'll see preferred closing attorney is Weissman PC or whoever. Well, sure. I might put that in and say, I want everything to close at Gannett because that's where I go more than often than not. And they know my name, and they, that's again a negotiable thing. Builders love to have it be their closing attorney. And sometimes that's no big deal and the buyer doesn't care. But if it's just a normal house, it could just be the listing agent just trying to make life easy for themselves.
The contract does say that it is the buyer's choice, but it's not one of those things you want to die on your sword about.
Exactly. So again, see whether it matters or not to the buyer. And I just say, I like it to be at an attorney that knows your name. And, if I need something special, I can get it answered faster because I have the partners on my bat phone. I just, hit a button and I'm talking to somebody if I need them. So again, I fill it in with the attorney I like to use, but you can decide if that's something that really, really matters, especially in multiple offer. You suddenly don't get, you'll do whatever that listing agent wants if you have to. Again, it's how you describe it. You can say, hey, I know you said you want to use your closing attorney, but you know what? My lender likes to work with them and my buyer's more comfortable. We'd really like to, they work, whatever. You can, again, it's the way you do it. Don't have to get into a, shouting match over it. Any questions?
RJ, just maybe some clarification on some things. So in normal circumstances, when it's not multiple offers, it's just a normal offer, the buyer's agent would suggest the law firm, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in some odd cases, I guess maybe the listing agent would prefer one. Okay.
Yes. And it's because they know they work hard. It's because it's because they just like to have a little more control. I did have an attorney forced on us, and they just flat out said, we were using my in-house lender, great job, but something was taken. I don't know what was going on, if we were trying to close quickly. And they all of a sudden announced, well, we didn't announce after at 5:01, they said, well, we didn't have the package until 5:13. We cannot close tomorrow. We're like, what? Our attorney would be able to close if they had the package a half an hour before. I mean, they would try to make it work. So this person was just, they had no allegiance to us, but we thought we were helping the seller out. And anyway, so. Let's think. So can anyone think why earnest money, a larger amount, might be attractive to somebody?
It shows commitment.
Yep.
In a multiple offer situation, it might stand out over others.
Right. Exactly. And like we were saying with a letter, if you had like this huge earnest money and a low offer, it doesn't just negate. It's if everything's strong. So that is something on a multiple offer, up the earnest money. Another thing you can do on earnest money, just thought of it, as if you think the earnest money is a little low when you're a seller, you could ask for more earnest money after the due diligence. So you're not asking for it right away, but let's say it's a 60-day closing. You just want to make sure, or it's a multiple offer. I want to make sure that this person isn't going to bail, and I don't really want the earnest money. I want a closing. So you can write a stipulation that says, you know, 5,000 more after due diligence, or 2,000 more, whatever if that's an issue. Okay. So some of you guys that have written a contract or started to experience that, tell me a little bit about due diligence. Anyone want to explain it to everybody else? Or anything interesting that's happened to you during what?
I mean, it's almost like the time frame to do your checks and balances, to make sure things are, you know, kosher, so to speak, with the property, to make sure that you're not inheriting, you know, something really sketchy, because you have a deadline with due diligence. So it's when you do your inspections, you know, chimney inspection, sewer, all that good stuff.
Yep, exactly.
And one more thing to add, it's also your safe space for your earnest money, because once due diligence is over, I mean, at that point, correct me if I'm wrong, you start to get locked in.
Correct. You still have the appraisal and financing, but those usually don't cause a problem. So yes, it is time. You don't want to go around having a buyer that makes a bunch of offers and then walks on the due diligence. You don't want people to ever hear that you're that kind of agent, or you don't want a buyer to spend money on inspections. But there will be houses you need to walk from for one reason or another. But it is a safe time. In a multiple contract, okay, I'll go ahead and jump into this. Y'all had asked me about escalation clauses. And when you're in a multiple contract and you say, I want this house no matter what, you can put in a stipulation that says the offer is $300,000. But if the seller receives, and your brokers all have this wording, if your seller receives another offer for anything over 300, we are willing to pay $2,000 more than whatever the other highest offer is. And then you can put a cap that I won't pay more than. That's the escalation clause, yes.
I actually did one of those, and actually caused me to win the contract.
There you go. And we used to just do $1,000, and now people, depending on the price in the neighborhood, I'm seeing all kinds of things. Some agents put a cap there. And so let's say you say you pay 300, but you're willing to pay as much as 320. My feeling, and this is only personal, if you put 320 and the highest offer is, or your offer is 300, they know you'd spend as much as 320. And the seller, in my opinion, sees that number and trying to figure a way to get you to pay that much. So I, many times, unless my buyer really needs a cap to sleep at night, I do not put a cap. And if for some reason it got crazy and the price went way higher than my buyer wanted to pay, I still have the due diligence to say, never mind, if we wanted to do our inspections or not, or they just said, oh my God, I never thought it would go this high. Now I, as the listing agent, normally call and say, do you think your buyer really meant to pay $320? Or are they going to freak out? And so I actually had one come in 50,000 over list. And I called the person who had the escalation clause and they said, oh my gosh, I could never do it. And so we went to number 2 that offered 50 over without them even knowing that there was somebody with an escalation clause, because that person really didn't, you know, that price, they never imagined it would go that high. So, but the due diligence is the protection for that. If you choose not to have a cap. And like I said, that makes sense. It doesn't really to me even, but I understand. I mean, ask your questions.
When do you know, like when a new bid comes in and your escalation clause kicks in? Like how do you stay on top of that?
The agent has to call you, and they have, and in this stipulation you say, and proof of the other price. They have to show you the other contract, at least the pages that show the price. And I also say net of closing costs, net of warranties and other concessions. So in other words, if my offer had no closing costs, but their offer had closing costs in it, well, they don't get to have that higher number. It's the net that they were going to get. Something just popped into my head about that. The other thing about an escalation clause is that you don't always get it. So like, let's say you offered 300 and someone else offered the 318, and then you had the escalation clause that would take it up to 320. Or let's say they offered 320 and you would be 322. They might say, well, wait, but you offered 300. I don't think you really love my house as much, or I think you're going to be a pain in the neck on the inspection because you're going to be upset that you had to pay so much. So sometimes your escalation clause does not mean that they're going to take you. They might, I lost one, and I actually, one of my best friends in real estate, I found out it was her that got it. It was an investor type house, and her investor went in with no due diligence because he does his own. My investor really wanted someone to look at something going on with a wall. So she wanted a short due diligence. And even though we had an escalation clause, and my friend told me later she did not put one in, they knew that she would do no due diligence. And so they just countered to her. So they just countered to her. So again, the escalation says, I really want it. But yet the seller is weighing everything. How much down? Is it cash? Is it a loan? How much earnest money? You know, they're looking at the whole offer. It's just not the price. So don't always remind them that they don't always get it. But it is a great tool. Questions on that? The other thing in a multi-offer is the number of days you put in that field. So in a normal world, the house has been for sale for a while. And who has a feeling or has a sense of what a normal amount is for due diligence?
Isn't it 10
After
days?
7 days.
The 14
days. 10 to 14. 7 to 14.
Yeah, 7 to 14. 10 is kind of, most people will go with that. As a listing agent, I think 14 is too long unless there's a holiday or something. I mean, I just don't want it to drag on. 7, if you're in a multiple contract, or even a 3, if you can actually call an inspector and line them up if you're in a multi-contract and say, I can do it in 3 days. or whatever you can do. And again, that would be if you had a buyer that could do that. And maybe you didn't need to find out, they just needed to know it was okay. They didn't care to ask for repairs. So 7, 10, 14 are more standard.
RJ, so due diligence is only for inspection. It's not appraisal and it's not financing or anything like that.
Yes, I mean, those are all separate.
Okay.
If you, some people used to race and try to get everything done during the due diligence, but a lot of people want to wait till after the inspection to order the appraisal. So all those dates are different dates.
Okay, so if you've got the inspection, but you don't have to have the appraisal done in that 10, let's say you've agreed to 10 days of due diligence. Okay.
Right. So the due diligence is for any kind of inspections you want to do. And I'm going to get you to go to the next page, that other page in a minute, but look at this B option payment. I have never used that. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I really have not ever used that. That's where you're giving money, kind of like maybe more in commercial where they give money and there's a due diligence that's much longer. So I'm not going to spend time on that because I've never used it in all the years it was put in there. I think it was supposed to be, I want more time and I want to give you some more money for that, but let's not spend time on something we don't do. Let's go to that page. It is page 3. So here is, go down to where 8, if you can, there you go. So here is all of the stuff about inspection and due diligence. There is a way to do no due diligence and right to request repairs, which is from a contract a long time ago, and there is actually an exhibit. If you're in a multiple contract, you can do that where it says, see, because with due diligence, you can simply get cold feet and the sellers know it, or at least their listing agents do and try to explain. A right to request repairs only without a due diligence means that you have got to give the seller a chance to fix what you don't like or what you're afraid of. And so some sellers would rather have that in a multiple contract. You don't really have to use it in a regular. Or just go with a really short due diligence. But in due diligence, you do have the right to inspect as well. It just is more broad. So under due diligence, you've got the inspection. You can do, tell me some of the other inspections. You get the regular inspector, the general inspector. I know Ryan mentioned sewer inspection. What other inspections might you consider with your buyer?
Fireplace.
Roof.
Perfect.
Termite.
Termites. Yep.
Mold.
Mold. I have a mold guy at one of my listings fixing it right now. I don't really think it was really bad mold, but you had to do something. Lead paint. That's the interesting one. I have had in all of my years of real estate, one person do a lead-based paint test. The ones at like Home Depot and stuff, they don't think they're really valid. But I have heard mixed reviews, and for the first time ever this year, I had somebody do a lead-based paint test. Plumbing inspection, that's good. You could have a heating and air person come out if you thought there was something you wanted to know, or it's a really old system. I usually start with a general inspection, and then if there's something that comes up or something they're really worried about, you do it up front. Radon is another test. So you can, that you don't have to really decide, but as you're now under contract, that's what that's for. duty to inspect the neighborhood. You can actually go on websites to find out about crime. This particular link that's blue is for sex offenders. Actually had one of my listings. There was a sex offender that popped up that everybody was freaked all of a sudden, anyway, and it turned out it was a friend of the child, like a teenager or a college student or something, and they'd stayed there. So the address was, and we found, the buyer found out that they didn't live there anymore. So that's a very interesting one. I have also heard stories that somebody can kind of get caught for something, and I don't know, whatever. I mean, like there's sex offenders here, and there's chronic, and then there's not. I mean, it's a very interesting website.
Is there a way to look up stigmatized properties?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never seen one. Transfers of warranties. I don't know what you'd be doing during, you could ask to see something. Sold as is. This is just trying to tell you what that means. But again, as Stacy says, don't be afraid to ask, because even if you sign a contract and say it's as is, if there's something you learn, again, it's the way you approach it. Hey, I'm looking at hey, Selena, I just wanted to let you know, I know it's an as is contract. We don't want to walk from it, but we just learned that your blah, blah, blah is, needs to be fixed. And that's just something we had not budgeted for, or we did a radon test and my goodness, you have a radon, so you can, whether they do it or not, they might say, we told you as is, and that's what we meant. Anything can be negotiated, and you can ask. And again, if you ask nicely, it doesn't have to become a war, and they can say no.
Arje, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I get really confused between due diligence and right to repairs. And our broker actually sent out an email because apparently probably a lot of people in our office are getting confused. So can you re-explain just the difference between the two so I make sure I'm understanding correctly?
Yeah. So the contract that we have is written with a due diligence. And that means that the buyer can walk for any reason. They just changed their mind. It's Tuesday. I don't want it anymore. The right to request repairs, if you override the due diligence and put 0 in there and say it's attached the exhibit, it says they cannot walk. They have to give the seller a chance to fix the stuff. And if the seller says no, they don't have to buy it. You would never use it, I don't think, unless you were in multi-contract.
And is the repairs kind of assuming they got an inspection back and then they're trying to walk? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So like now, you can be a real pain in the neck and ask for every single thing on the inspection, and, try to make it not attractive to fix it. But we rarely use it that often unless it's multi-contract. But the reason for it is what happens in multi-contracts, and I've seen it more this year than any other year. You have 10 offers. All of a sudden, the buyer that gets it knows they offered to pay more than anybody else. And then they kind of panic, and then they walk. And then all of a sudden, all the other buyers don't want the house anymore, decided, well, I guess I'm glad I didn't get it, because, they try to make themselves feel better. And so it can cost the seller money if their buyer walks. So the right to request repairs can be, to some sellers, comforting to know they're not going to just change their mind for no reason, that they've looked at the neighborhood, they've looked at the crime reports. They're not going to find another reason to get out, because that's all available before you make an offer. It's just the inspection you would not do.
So if you have that kind of contract with the right to request repairs and you've gotten an inspection and a few things came back, you as the buyer's agent would request repairs from the seller and then they either say yes or no.
Mm-hmm. And then,
and if they say no, then you can walk.
yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, so even in a due diligence, you can ask for things and the seller can say no. And you can decide if you're going to buy it or not as the buyer. Sometimes to get over that, you just get pricing for the buyer so they know how much it's going to cost. So then they can decide, okay, I really do want this house. After all this, I really want it anyway. So yeah, those are good questions. But I don't know that you'd ever use right to request repairs if it wasn't in a multi-contract.
Mrs. McCarty?
Yes.
It is 7 bells and we really should take about a 10-minute
break.
And I got to take a picture. So Audra, would you stop sharing your screen, please? I need everybody. And a few of you, I sent you little love notes in the chat because I don't know which market center you're at. So please check the chat. And hold on.
And I just saw you sent them an escalation clause, which is perfect.
Yeah, that was Lynn's on lacrosse. Okay, Olga, I need to see your face, my dear. And Maria Charnecki, come back to me. All right, here we go. Y'all, Anthony, you just look, bored. Okay, cheese. And let me quickly post that. Oop. Sorry.
Stacy, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Our second session on Saturday, I forgot the guy's name. He was great. But he didn't do any kind of picture taking or any record keeping of us being here. I just wanted to let you know that. I don't know if that's.
No, wait, I was with you in the afternoon. So it must have been the morning.
He was the morning session. That's right, because it was Tash.
Oh, lovely. No screenshots.
He didn't, right, guys?
He's from Peachtree Road.
Yep, Peachtree Road.
He was great. He just didn't do anything he started like 20 minutes late and then didn't do any screenshots. So I just want to make sure we get credit.
Right.
You know, we will make sure. I'll follow up.
Jennifer, there was another person in there. She just didn't speak. She was taking screenshots. We just didn't know it. Which would be nice to know, but she was in there.
Okay, I just
Yeah,
heard
Katie Staples told me she's waiting for that person to send in her screenshots. So
it may have been I think it may have been Lexi. Was Lexi on the call? Lexi Rodriguez?
That's the name.
That's what someone says, yeah.
Okay, y'all, break. 10 minutes. Thank you.
Miss Arje, really quick, I don't know if I explained my question the right way as far as with those stigmatized properties. I asked that because I have a client, she's kind of like very frightful of being in houses that someone may have died in or, something like that. So I didn't know how I would go about even asking a seller that question.
Okay, so it's my understanding that if someone died in a house, you are not obligated. There's nowhere on the disclosure because that could harm, that's private information. But if it's my understanding, so check with a broker, if you are specifically asked that question, you're supposed to answer it truthfully. So you would have to call every house before you showed it if she won't buy it. And I've been asked that before. Are you there?
I'm here, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's not a list. There's not a website because that's very personal.
Right. Almost like a protected class in some cases too, right? So.
Right, because if somebody is afraid of why do they care? It could be religious, it could be anything, any reason, just the creeps, whatever, but as a seller, there's nothing wrong with the house. It didn't really affect the house, so it's just like crime. You don't put it on your disclosure if you ever had a robbery or the next door neighbor, because again, it could harm you. So you don't have to disclose something that isn't about the house. So you would have to call and ask specific questions. And I've had someone call me before and ask that.
Okay. So I guess it's kind of like basically how you said also how you ask it, kind of like asking more so, well, why are you guys looking to sell, or just kind of see if you can come across that information in some way.
Yeah, but I mean, if your buyer seriously wants to know, now if you call, if there were like 5 offers and you were asking that, I might go, well, they're a little bit of a problem. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, I wonder what else they're, you know what I mean? Like, I'd be wondering what other things, but again, if your buyer that matters to them, you have to do your best for that buyer.
Okay, thank you.
I laughed. Someone asked what time we were supposed to be back, and I have no idea exactly either, but sometime. If anybody has any questions while we're waiting for folks.
2 more minutes.
Yeah, I thought we had a few more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on the escalation clause, do you recommend just starting your buyer off with that on a contract? Or because in my case, I didn't do it until he lost about 3 homes, and then I brought it to him and he was okay with it. So we end up doing it, and we was able to win the home by doing that. So do you recommend to start him off from especially in this market, from the initial first offer?
Well, I tell them about it.
Right.
And in fact, I've written an email that I sometimes email them. These are some of the things to think about if it's a multiple contract, so they can read what I say it and I follow up. The girl I'm closing with tomorrow wouldn't hear of an escalation clause until she lost 2 or 3 houses, and you just have to say, again, it's how you say things. I say, I am not telling you to do this. If you don't want to do this, I just know what works. And I'm giving you all of the arsenal, all of the, things that you could do. And you decide what's comfortable for you, as you're describing it. Because it's not like you're making this up. And then a lot of people will say, oh, how do you know there's really another offer? Well, with the escalation, you actually see it. But still, you just have to go on faith, because if an agent goes around saying they have multiple offers and they don't, everybody's going to figure it out. So, I always say, don't believe it. Believe that they have other offers.
Okay, kids.
Okay. Take your
I need faces. Let's see. Here we go. Ryan, Jennifer Hughes, Sandra. There's Ryan.
I was just smiling away at the camera.
Yeah. Zandra. All right. Let's do cheese. And let me.
While she's taking the picture, one thing just interesting, I had a multiple offer this year, and the agent, it was really funny. She says, I hate escalation clauses, so don't bring me an escalation clause. Make your best offer. And so we discussed it with the buyer, and I said, sounds like this really matters to the agent. I mean, I don't know if the seller cares, but and we just I said, we have to wrestle with it, and you do what you want to do, but this is what she said. So a lot of negotiation is, you got some personalities, whether it's the agent, the seller, but don't make it about you. Just try to work through with your client and see what they're comfortable with. Got it?
You said the other agent didn't like escalation clause?
This agent told me she did not like escalation clauses because she felt like it was cheating.
Is it her call? I mean, if the buyers are sending in offers.
Right. But see, I didn't want to really call her on it, because if I said, well, you have to present, she has to present all offers, but I also, the agent does have influence. So I wasn't going to openly fight with her. So I just said, this is our best offer and we hope we're close. We did not put an escalation clause in at your request. But if for some reason you like our offer and we're close, please come back to us or something, but I honored what she asked. So sometimes it's that kind of thing. Yeah, and Audra is saying she saw that where they actually had it in the FMLS or maybe in an email to you. Okay, I want to try to get through the last part of the contract, and so that we can start talking a little bit about negotiating too and counters, so we don't run out of time, and then we can always come back for other specifics. So Audra, can you bring us back? We don't have much on page 1 left. And in person, it's fun. We could have like 2 groups or 3 groups and all try to make an offer on a house. It's hard to do in this environment. So please do, let's just keep jumping in and talking about things. On page 1, we're going to go back to page 1. On lead-based paint, which is number 9, paragraph 9. Okay, if anybody's written a contract and forgets to check this box, and for some reason, I have to check this thing. I don't know what's happening with when I change. Sometimes when I don't, I do it too fast. You have to check either was or was not built prior to 1978. I don't know what is really the policy of different offices or even my own specifically, but I actually will check whatever was or was not. But for my sellers, I actually have them sign a lead-based paint exhibit on every house. Because they do once in a while come around and audit Keller Williams and other companies and be sure you have them. And it's very finable by the government if you don't have that when you should. Harry Norman started doing this, so I just picked it up. And like I said, I don't know that it's a policy, although Lynn LaCrosse said it was a great idea. I just say, look, there's barn doors in houses now. There's old mantles. So you could have something that has lead-based paint in your house and not even know it. So by saying you have no knowledge of lead-based paint, you have no reports, it's a CYA. So I actually, as a listing agent, always attach one. And if a house was built in 1978 or built, because it says prior to, or if it's built in 1979, just in case there was we're looking now at Facebook. What's happening? Oh, there we go. Okay, we're somehow not on the contract. But anyway, there we go. So I just always put one in there because it doesn't hurt and because of what I just said. And if it's anywhere close, I'm sure to put it in there. There's an exhibit for that, which you'll fill out. And if you're the buyer's agent, there's a place to say they were given a 10-day right to inspect. And there's some other places. We'll look at that if we have time, but it's fairly self-explanatory when you fill that out. But always have a lead-based paint especially if it was built prior to 1978.
Arje, there was sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
Interesting story from a friend of mine who concentrates their area in Buckhead, and they had this gorgeous, massive home off West Paces that they were trying to sell, and it was fairly new construction, but all of the beams had been imported from a different country, and they were old, historic, massive beams, gorgeous. But then it changed their listing because they had to go back and write an amendment for lead-based paint because now it had lead-based paint.
Oh, wow. See? Yeah. And mantles and the door, all that stuff that you can use. Okay. Thanks for sharing that, though. That's a perfect example.
Yeah, I thought it was odd and very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, number 10 is another important paragraph for us as Keller Williams. Or anybody really. A lot of buyers agents do not check this. They fill out selling brokers, Keller Williams, and they don't fill out the listing broker side. Number 1, fill it out and just fill in the company's name and just assume they're a client, because that box is never referred to again. You know, you start countering and everybody forgets that box, and then you have to fix it later. But as the buyer's agent, just fill it out. It takes you 2 seconds to cut and paste from FMLS to put the name there, and always assume they're a client. If they're not, you know, they can make a change. But more often than not, 99.99% they are. So you're always going to be representing your buyer or seller as a client, unless you're doing something where they're a customer. And I rarely see that, where you don't want them to hire you as a professional. Now, the dual agency, the Rawls Group does not like dual agency because it can really get you into some trouble where you're trying to represent both parties. Talk to your broker about that in your office if there's a situation that arises where you truly know two people the same or whatever, but they would work you through that, or you could have an associate help you by writing the offer, and there's many ways to handle it. And then the other most interesting, line 4, acting as a designated agent. It used to be we had to do that for Rawls Group to Rawls Group, but then we realized it's not the same exactly. So it's only if you're selling a listing that is listed by your office, not another Keller Williams and not another Keller Williams Rawls Group. And that is where you're assigned as the selling broker, and I'm assigned as the list, if I'm the listing agent, as the listing broker, and you're designated to the person that you're representing. So that's what that means. I think I remember when I was reading over the new contract, I think they're now going to start saying buying broker or something, because everybody got confused as who's the selling broker, because it's really, you know, they got confused. So I think that word is changing. It doesn't mean anything. It's just interesting. Material relationship, number C in that paragraph, is if it's your mother, your sister, your, you know, something you feel needs to be disclosed. It's supposed to be like a real relation, or if there was, it could be if it's your, you know, boyfriend, or maybe you're not blood relatives. There could be some other reasons you would actually put that in there. Time limit of offer is simply a time that you want an answer. Now, people get very, let's say I say it's 5 o'clock, or let's say I said it was 7:30 tonight. It really means that the offer you're presenting is good till 7:30 tonight. It doesn't have to mean that you can counter, but as a courtesy, you should answer in some way. Even if you call and say, look, we're going to counter, we don't have it ready for you yet, but try to communicate before that deadline in some way, just to keep the conversation going. They want an answer by that time. It doesn't mean you can't keep communicating. If something happens, your people are on a plane, they can't answer. You don't have, you know, you can start it back up with a counter offer. So just, but that is a time. Now, if for some reason, I've always seen 11:59 after 3 days after the offer's made. I never do 11:59 because I don't want to be talking about an offer. Oh, you're saying like noon, maybe. You can put any time. I usually do 5 o'clock. It depends when I'm getting the offer to them. I'll give them at least 24 hours, maybe 48. It depends. If the house has been sitting for a while, if you're in a bidding war, you want to give them plenty of time. You can go without a time limit of the offer, but then you have to withdraw the offer, like if you didn't get the house, or you're tired of waiting and they're not answering. So you can withdraw the offer in the way you gave it, which was through email with a form that says you're withdrawing. But try to give them some time, but no, don't give them too much time, whatever your buyer's comfortable with. If you're making an offer and maybe the house has been on the market a long time and you kind of want to say, you can have 3 or 4 days to consider this. You might be like, you know, just take your time. you know, there's different strategies of what you're going to do, but give them at least 24 hours in most cases. So as any questions on those last few things on this page?
RJ, I have one. I'm sorry.
No, please.
I have a lot of questions. I apologize. For C, just above number 11, where it says material relationship disclosure. So I have some investment properties that I plan on selling in 2021. Is this where I would disclose that I'm an agent selling my own home?
It's mainly if you're not the seller or buyer, you would put it in there, but you can put it, you could put something there and you could put a stipulation, especially if you own it with more than one person.
Got it.
You can put something because you're the agent. You could say, if it's you could say, you know, put it there that agent is the buyer or is the seller. You could put something there. You could put it in the seller's disclosure if you're selling something.
Okay.
As well, and maybe make it a stipulation. But yes, you want to disclose it because you're an agent.
Right. Okay.
Okay, let's go. So these next pages are all going over what those paragraphs meant. So let's go all the way to page 7. Okay, so page 7 has paragraph 8 on page 7 has all of the different exhibits. And then they have 2 others. So there could be something else you would add. These are most of the exhibits that are used at some point. And you need to check them and give them a letter and add them. So you'll see all cash, or a little farther down, conventional loan or FHA. You just check one of those. The backup agreement is if you lost a house in a bidding war, let's say, but your buyer wanted to be a backup. And I started doing that a lot more this summer because the first buyer was freaking out because they got it for too much. And so I did backups several times because things were coming back on the market. So that would be, you know, you might do that after the fact. Closing attorney acting as holder of the earnest money. There's that form we talked about, which would mainly be if somebody was making you an offer on your listing. And then you've got community association, if you have one of those, condominium, if you're a condo, lead-based paint, always have that, or in most cases, lease purchase. Can't say I've done a lot of lease purchases because a lot of times they don't close. But again, and usually the sellers need their money to buy the next house, so you don't see a lot of those. A legal description, that's if you have one. Loan assumption, don't see a lot of those. The interest rates are so good right now. When rates go way up, we used to have those. Sale or lease of buyer's property. That is if your buyer has to sell their house to buy or has to close on the house. So that's when you would use that one. Property.
Can you explain that one, please?
Yeah, so I have to close to buy, and I want it to be a contingency because I'm afraid. So right now in Atlanta, I could not imagine a seller taking a contingency on you selling your house. It's not for sale and it's not under contract, because you could ask $1 million for a $300,000 house. You're not, you know, the seller would be at risk. But if your house is under contract and you have to buy to sell to buy, and when I've had to do that, I have all my ducks in a row. I say, here's the letter on their buyer. Their buyer's already done the inspection and we're through that. It's already appraised. It's this. You can help get that through, but it's another contingency. So in a multi-contract, that would be a scary contingency for the seller, because that's something that could go wrong. But if your buyer truly has to sell to buy, you could use that. Now, I did have a very savvy buyer that he actually calculated the earnest money, and he was nervous about his buyer, but his buyer was going to lose $4,000 if he didn't close, because we were through all of the contingencies, the appraisal, the financing, everything. And then he was going to lose $5,000 if he didn't close. So he did not put that in because he wanted to get the house, and he figured he'd lose $1,000 if the other guy defaulted on him. So that was a risk worth doing. So you don't, if just because you need to do that, you can put your earnest money on the line, if that makes any sense. In this case, he wanted the house in a bidding war so much, he didn't use a contingency, even though he needed that money, or he figured he might have friends help, not friends, parents could lend him money for 2 weeks or something if he had to. So, but that's what that contingency means. You have to sell or lease, but mostly sell a house.
Can you link a time constraint to that?
Usually it runs up to the closing, but yes, there's a date in that form. You can also do what's called have a kick out, where the seller can keep trying to sell their house. That's a whole nother conversation, but there's a couple of things on that form you can negotiate. As a seller, if somebody makes you an offer saying they have to sell a house to buy, and it's not under contract and really locked up, I'm going to tell my seller that's a risky one. I mean, I would go back and say, look, go sell your house, or make it non-contingent, put some serious earnest money, and I know you're going to get it done because your house is in a hot neighborhood. Why not? Why do you need a contingency? Go sell your house, do the price, do the staging, do the repairs, and because I always say, as a listing agent, I say, you're giving us your burden. It's your house, not ours. You're the one negotiating. Why would you make it our lives, held up by your negotiating? So that's what I say on that when I'm the listing agent.
The only reason why I asked that is, in my neighborhood, I know a lot of people like to trade up and do it very quickly. And given the market as it is right now, I had a friend just do this the other day. They wrote in, I guess there was a time limit where they put a set amount of days to say, look, we haven't even hit the market, but we think we'll get an offer within 24 hours. And they did. Yeah.
So you can do something like that.
Okay.
All is negotiable. You might have a survey attached, or you might, they might not. Not as often. Temporary occupancy is where, if you're going to allow possession after closing, that's down there towards the end. I don't even know what a USDA RD loan is. I mean, I think we did one once, but anyway, so that's another loan, or a VA loan, which is the veterans loan. So you use whichever loan you're getting, conventional, VA, FHA, or this USDA, and you just use the right form. Then you have special stipulations. If you're trying to be attractive to the seller, less stipulations, the better. But if it's a house that's been on the market a while and you want to ask for home warranties, this is where you do it. If you ask for a termite bond or something else, if there's something, let's think. If there's like a repair that the seller says he's going to do, like they found out they had a roof leak and they've disclosed it, you could write that in there. Anything you want to write a stipulation about, you can. And you can always go to your broker to help you if you needed it, or somebody at the office. But tell me, let's try to get people talking again. What kinds of stipulations could you think of that you've either seen or heard about or could imagine?
Would this be where you put like window treatments and things of that nature if you wanted to keep those?
Yes, you can, depending on your lender. Sometimes they'll want that on what's called a bill of sale. If it's just maybe window treatments, you probably be okay. Especially now, look on the disclosure, because if window treatments are already checked, you could just say everything on the disclosure staying at no cost if you felt like you needed to or clarify. So yes, but sometimes.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes the lender doesn't like too much personal items, but you can talk to them if it's a lot.
Usually in that stipulation, I think what you talked about earlier, as far as like the buyer will, kind of like exceed any offer, but not over this price or whatever like that?
Yep, that's where you put the escalation clause, yes. That's where you could put, I'm one of 3 investors and I'm the listing, if you wanted to further explain that you're a material relation, if you needed to. Anything else y'all have think of?
Quality of life
Sorry, what'd you say, Audra?
Maybe a quality of life stipulation where due diligence is concerned.
Okay. Yep.
Arje, I can think
no
of one.
weekends, no holidays.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of people use that stipulation that says, that if a due diligence ends on a certain day, you can have that in there.
Arje, what if it's about a property that potentially has a harvest?
Potentially.
Yeah, like if it was a tree farm and you were negotiating a sale to say like you get the land, but the lumber is mine.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be where you'd put it. If it's a condo and there's an associate, like a fee, if it's not already on the community disclosure, like there's an assessment or something, you could put something there, or you could ask for 2 months to be paid for some reason. Okay, someone's asking about the stipulation if financing blows up on the closing day. Well, okay. So in the financing contingency, it has dates, like 21 days for an appraisal, whatever dates you put in, 21 days, 25. If you, as a buyer's agent, if you put in that if the financing, falls apart on the day of closing, the buyer gets their earnest money back, that would really bother me as a listing agent, because I would be wondering what you knew that, like, why do you think that's going to happen? Let's say it's a 60-day closing and the financing contingency is over on day 25. I would say, well, why do you need to wait till the last minute? We're waiting 60, you don't want to close for 60 days, then let's close in the 25. I wouldn't want to have a month where somebody could get out of at least losing the earnest money, because they're in charge more than the seller is. But you could put something in there if it's a specific situation. And if the seller agreed to it, you're good. And literally anything can be in there that you need to. And again, in a multi-contract, you want to have fewer because you look easier. So, and at the bottom of that page is a place that says additional stipulations. Hopefully most offers don't have more than one page of additional stipulations. So, and some people have a lot of boilerplate stipulations that they put in every contract. And I do too, but then I also try to figure out what I really need. Like for instance, cleaning. You can ask for the seller to hire a cleaning service, but boy, does it make proud sellers mad. You don't think my house is clean. So again, if it's a multi-contract or versus a house that's been sitting forever, cleaning can be funny, like everything can be. Certain houses, the cleaning might be a no big deal, and others, it really pisses off the seller or makes them upset. Also, somebody could have a house professionally cleaned and the buyer gets there and says, well, it's not clean enough. So both sides, I tell my sellers, you need to leave this house the way you want to find it. And some are going to be like neat nicks, and some people might not be as neat as others. And then with buyers, I say, if you really want cleaning a specific way, you need to have a cleaning service or do it yourself, and have somebody, like that, and follow around, and you want certain things done because you have allergies or whatever. So you kind of know your people and decide which way to go. That the cleaning can make everybody frustrated. It's just funny. Okay.
Arje, what are some of your boilerplate contingencies?
mainly the ones we have. I do have a seller. I do say all things on seller's disclosure checked. With, in addition, like let's say they don't check the refrigerator, but they don't mind leaving it. You could add the refrigerator in that sentence. All personal items, whatever the word is on the top of the seller's disclosure page. I put home warranty. I put, yep, you can put a wall repair there if there's something, if there's, you know, something you're worried about. I do home warranty, termite bond, again, if there's nobody else and they don't have a bond or whatever. What else do I put in there all the time?
It used to be that refrigerators were always taken with the seller. When I grew up, that was the way it was, but that's not really the case anymore, is it?
It's about 50-50.
Oh, it still is?
Yeah, it really just, oh yeah.
Why do you take your fridge? That's just so random. Like, why not your stove or your?
Well, those are more like attached, where the refrigerator just plugs in and pulls out. So yes, this is where you could ask for covenants. If it's a condo or a house that's in a planned community, this is where you could ask for covenants. That's a good idea as well. Let's go to page 8. So this is where you fill in the buyer's information as the buyer's agent. If you have the tax records or the title, you could, it's always nice if you're pretty sure who the seller is, you could fill that in, or you could leave it for the listing agent to do that. Down below, the listing broker and the selling broker, this is my personal thing. It is really easy to cut and paste the information from FMLS on the listing side if I'm the buyer, or vice versa. So you could fill it in and then it's there for the other company. Some people leave it blank. They're trying to save time, but to me, it's just a courtesy. And then the contract looks more official and all of that. I mean, it's just, you're doing a little bit of extra work, but not really, because it's cut and paste from FMLS. And you can click on the agent's name and it'll take you and have all the address, everything. The only thing they don't have is realtor membership, so you can leave that blank. But anyway, you could do it for them or let them do it later. But if you want them to actually accept the offer, they're going to have to fill it all in, which could, I don't know if it's considered a real counter or not, but it's nice to fill it in if you like, especially if you're trying to make an offer.
Okay, got to speak it. The minimum is that you have to have the listing brokerage firm, the licensee, their Georgia real estate license, and the brokerage firm license number. Those are the bare minimum. Won't be a proper contract without those licenses. But I'd like to show you, if Audra would stop screen sharing for a second, I'm going to show you how easy it is. Wait a minute. Go back here. I'm going to screen share. So this is one of Arje's listings. And all you do, kids, scroll down to the listing agent's name. It's hyperlinked. Click on it. Bada boom.
There it is.
Everything you need for filling out the right side, the listing agent's info and their office info is right there. There is no reason not to do it.
But I have to tell you, I've been getting a lot of offers that don't have that filled out. And like I said, it just, because then you know that they're expecting a counter almost, like they're too lazy to fill it all out. So I counter, and I have a countering form that says listing agent and seller are to be listed as below. But still, especially if you're making an offer and you're trying to act like you think they're going to take it, they got to fill it out. So it, you know.
Yep. So Rawls Group, do us proud.
Yeah, it's just a courtesy as well. But like I said, and it's also not a contract if it doesn't have it in it. Okay, so that's the offer. I'm going to leave the exhibits till later because those are more self-explanatory, but though, you know, we've got all those exhibits that were listed on page 7. So let's talk about, so now what? So you got this offer written up and you send it to the buyer to sign, and it's a wonderful world. I'll sound like I'm 105, but you used to have to drive contracts around. I mean, like literally. And then we used to have to present them in person. That really makes me feel old. But now it's so easy with all of the different technologies that we have. So easy for them to fill out and sign and so forth. The only negative of that is people are not reading the contracts. And they're like, oh, I trust you. Where do I sign? They just sign away. So if you have a first-time buyer, or even, I don't care, someone that hasn't sold their house in a while, make them look at it. Like I always, you know, even I'll say, before you sign this, you must review it, or I'll send it to them as a PDF, because you really want them to take ownership. Like the seller say, oh, I didn't know I said that. Well, you signed it. And you know what I mean? So try to slow them down a little bit. If they have, unless they made like 5 offers in a row, just to talk about the main parts. This is what you're committing to. This is what earnest money, you know, spend some time on that so they know you're telling them in the buyer's consultation, you're telling them again, just know that you need to tell people things more than once. Okay, so now it's time. What do you do with this offer? Send it to the listing agent.
Present it.
Yep, send it to the listing agent. You can talk to them and give them some, you know, a little bit of information. You can write an email with this, you know, anything you feel you want to say. If it's a lower offer, it is not a multiple contract. You can say, I know that this is lower than your seller might have expected, but this is made on the comparables, not the list price, or, you know, whatever. Don't beat them up, but if there's something you want to share, understand that agent might just forward your offer. So always know that they're might forward your offer with your comments. So sometimes if I am making a low offer, I might try to put a gentle, well-worded, very diplomatic statement. Or like my young woman tomorrow, she was not one to write a letter. She finally did start writing letters after a while, but at first I would just say, you know, something about her being well qualified with the lender. I know she's going to get this loan. You can pick her, kind of thing. So here's my biggest piece of advice that has nothing to do with the class itself, but there are many times that texting is not the way to go. And this is one of them. I think it's very important to pick up the phone. If you want to find out about the house up front and then here to present the offer or talk about it, make sure. I have had people just email me offers. I might not see it, you know, for 5 hours if I'm out showing houses or something. So do call them and follow up with a text if you don't reach them. Make sure, and then even in your email, say, please confirm receipt. I'm also very aware in the contract negotiating part of what the other agent likes. So if they use Remind and I use DocuSign, I'll send it to them as a PDF. I want them to be able to open it easily. I don't want them to have trouble with my program. This is not about me. So that's where you can, like, if they're having trouble, just send it to them in a way that will help them, and make sure they know that it's there and that they've responded so that you know what's happening. Talk about your buyer if that's going to be helpful. And then if you need it, another trick is to have the lender aware that you're making the offer so they don't say, Stacy, who? Or that, because they're so busy. Or you can also ask your lender to call, especially in a bidding war, to call the listing agent. It totally freaks them out because they're trying to track down most other people's lenders. And I don't know if everybody does it. I know they don't, because some lenders are surprised. Every single offer on my listings, I call that lender before, simultaneously to sending the offer to my seller. I want to hear the voice of that lender. I want to know what they've done. I don't care what the letter says. I just want to hear that I can sleep at night for this loan. And I said, I don't need personal information. I just need to know how far you've gotten into the loan. And is this a slam dunk? Is this one that I can sleep at night? And they laugh and then they'll say, oh yeah, la, la, la. But in all these years, I had one person hesitate. He goes, what's the price? Let me run the ratios. And I knew this person was very close to the house, so I got a sense. So I had two buyers to choose from, and I chose the one, or the seller chose the one that was more confident about the loan. So that's one thing to do. Okay, so what can happen with the offer? There's three things that can happen.
Reject it.
They can reject it outright.
Accept it.
Accept it.
Or counter.
Or counter. A+, everybody. Okay. If you're the listing agent, I tell my sellers, I don't care how mad you are if it's too low. Oh, okay. Somebody was just saying that NAR is taking the position that love letters from the buyers run the risk of fair housing. Okay, so take that into advice, but decide what works. I mean, what you are comfortable with. There is a lot going on about that, and I've been following it as well. But you also, like I said, you have somebody that's lived in their house for 30 years. It is nice to know that someone likes it. I think you can do a letter and not disclose some, you can say something. I mean, about what you like about the house. You don't have to do a picture or whatever. So anyway, that's going to be something I think that will be coming up next year more and more. But again, the reason for the love letter, as we call it, is not to be that. It's more to be where you're a human. You're saying something nice to the seller. They feel beat up when they're selling their house, that kind of thing. So we'll have to talk about that a lot next year. So with the counters, when I have a seller that says, I am not responding, my goal is always to get that seller to respond, even if they came down $100. I mean, like, in other words, if you just slam the door, it totally shuts down the conversation. If you counter in some fashion, now there's a few times you might not, but at least gets it going. And then they'll say, well, that's a ridiculous counter. They only came down $1,000. What? And you say, yeah, but how do you respond to this low offer? Whatever. And it's also a time that you can educate the buyer. Again, you're writing to the agent. You're never talking to somebody else's client, but as a listing agent, I can say, thank you so much for the offer. Our seller was, very, appreciative of your efforts. However, and then that's where you could say why you thought the house was worth more, and that, this neighborhood is not, whatever. And that it's going to be forwarded to the buyer or some form of it. And you could make your points there. But I always try to get the seller to at least counter, to keep it moving. On the seller side, let's go over there for a minute. So you get two little funny things. When you have a buyer and they're stalling and they're not sure about making one of my favorite things I heard in a Keller Williams script class was, do you want to sleep on it or in it? And I just always thought that was hilarious. I don't say that very often, but I will in jest. I'll say, well, some people say, because if they hesitate, the house might not be there the next day. So I just say, imagine if you called me, would you be disappointed if it was gone? That's how you can know if you really love this house. Again, I'm always reminding them, I'm not selling them a house. I'm selling them to the seller. So when they don't want to get pre-qualified, nope, this is not for me. It's for you to get a house, that kind of thing. The other thing with multiple offers or something, that it'll come to me. But anyway, that with sellers, when they get really cranky because the offer's not what they want, I always say, yes, but what about all of the other buyers that have come to your house and you're mad because they didn't make you an offer? Well, now here we have one. So it's not what we want, but let's see if we can make it what we want. And again, you just kind of cajole them into it. And then once in a while, very rarely, but I'll say, well, this is a lot better than the offer we had yesterday. If they're really will not, they're just getting really whatever, and I'm trying to break the tension, and they'll say, what offer? We didn't have an offer yesterday. And I'll just say, exactly. We didn't have an offer yesterday. This person has given you, their time. They've made you an offer. You don't like it? What don't we like? Besides the price, what else don't we like? And get them off the price and into the terms. Is $5,000 enough? Are we okay with that? Okay. What about this date? Does that date work for you? Look at your calendar. You out of town that week, whatever. So you just get them off the price and get them into the stipulations and the details, and then go back to the price. So that's my advice on listings. The other thing with listings, there is a form, and I use a spreadsheet that I just did on Excel, same thing. But there is a form called, and I think it's in one that, it is one that Stacy sent you. You can just look at it real quick, but you don't have to do it right now. Is estimated net to seller, where you actually, and I don't know that a lot of people put it in writing, but my sellers are like, oh my gosh, I've sold 5 houses before I never got this. They think it's great, where you just go over the net to seller. So you put price, closing costs, how much is the home warranty they want, how much is the termite bond they want, and you show them what their net is at commission. And just kind of in that way, they feel so much more comfortable. And then the other thing I have on my spreadsheet, which always freaks them out, and even though I told them this at the listing presentation, I have a number, and I used to have it as 1%, and I upped it to 1.5 about 2 years ago, that says budget for inspection repair. And they're going, what is this $10,000? And I'm like, read the line. It's separate. It's way down. It's past the net. And then I said, we have to remember that an inspector's coming in here and you tell me that your home has nothing wrong with it. And I'm going to tell you that it does, and that it's going to be in the, and I always tell them, I used to say 1%, and now I say 1.5, because it's a number that we can't forget. And we need to remember that they're going to come in and they're going to find things, and we're going to need to fix them if they're reasonable. Because if you don't, you're going to lose that buyer and you're going to have to fix it anyway, probably. So that's my dialogue on that. And I always bring it up during the negotiation, even though it's a little, they get all cranky. And then I say, but if your house is as perfect as you say, it's not saying you have to spend this. It's just reminding you this is going to happen next. And then you go over, as I told you, you call that lender, see what's going on, and do that as you're negotiating with the seller and try to get them to counter. Have any of you, do we have, I think we have a counter form as well. We could pop that up and take a look. Any thoughts though on the offer on the seller side, since we've spent a lot more time talking about the buyer? As someone said earlier, they're very, they think their house is perfect. They don't always know what their other neighbors had to do to sell. But you just have to just be polite and persistent in a kind way and say, again, this is what even when you're pricing the house, I'm always very careful with a seller to say your house is worth whatever the buyer is willing to pay. And I say that all the time, even when we're, going over feedback, so that they understand some houses might sell for more than they're worth, and some might sell for a little bit less than they might, quote unquote, be worth. But again, it's all how they chose to stage and how you know, how it looks and what else is for sale. It's also about the competition.
Quick question.
Yeah.
When you have a seller that has multiple offers, how do you present all of those offers in a way that's not overwhelming to a seller?
Okay. A lot of times, depending who it is, I'll actually go to their house and go over them all. But I send them ahead of time. It depends on their, you know, age or whatever. If I think I could sit down and talk to them easier, if it's possible. I do a spreadsheet with Excel that has them all next to each other. And, you know, it's just price, you know, and then I also will put anything personal we know about the buyer, like, or not, like this one's putting 20% down. This one's cash, and talk about the positives and negatives of those forms of payment. I'll also put, if we happen to know anything, like, is it a first-time buyer versus somebody that's bought 7 houses? Is it an investor versus a first-time buyer? Like, especially if it's an estate, you know, the investor might take it more as is and the buyer might get scared. I mean, again, you're just giving them information that's not always true. I mean, like, it's not true, you know, that this is just historically, this is what you need to think about. I'll also, like I said, it's not just the money. So you look at the price, and usually with multi-contracts, it'll come down to 1 or 2. Some people are, you know, some people come in low, and so maybe you don't even, you look at them all, but you try to say, okay, this buyer is stronger financially. It's, you know, 20% down versus 5% down. It just means that that loan's a little easier to get, but that doesn't mean they're really that far off. Look at the price, and then look at the due diligence is really important to me, how short or long that is. I look at the earnest money a little bit, and the stipulations. So you're trying to see who is the strongest, the least risk of walking away. You might have a conversation with the agent to try to learn more about, like, you can ask a question. Have they made an offer on any other house? Have they ever been under contract? If you really have a lot of offers to choose from, because if you find somebody that's walked on 3 houses, you might not want to choose that person just from, you know, history. If you can find it out without, you know, there's a way, sometimes, again, chatting with the agent, you might find out something just by saying, have they been looking a while? What, you know, why haven't they bought, or whatever? You could ask questions like that, because you're trying to find the buyer that's the most into this deal, if you have a choice. So the counter offer, do we want to try to pull it up?
So I have a quick question. When it comes to conventional and FHA loans, is it okay for a seller to say that they only want someone with a conventional loan and not an FHA? Like, is that ethically okay? Because I've seen it in remarks, but I didn't really know, you know, how that was looked at.
So the reason that they say that, and I don't think I would ever say it, like in writing, because it could be offensive, is that the FHA and the VA, for instance, their appraisal process is different. So their appraisal runs up to the day of closing. So that question earlier saying, what happened, you know, can I put a stipulation if it all blows up? That FHA or VA exhibit is allowing for them to wait on the appraisal to the last minute. And if there's a problem, you know, you've already got moving trucks hired. So that would be a factor in describing the different buyers and their loans. So if you had a conventional loan against a FHA loan, you would just, because they also, both FHA and VA, have a sentence in there on the exhibit that has, that appraiser can also, has a checklist. We don't see it often, but they can ask for repairs. Now, supposedly conventional can too, but I've never seen it. So you're just sharing information. The one time I called the lender in all these years and the lender said, oops, let me check the ratios, was a VA loan, and it's 100% financing. And it also usually means during the inspection, they don't have cash. That looks different to me. Maybe it.
Yeah, no, that's not a GAR form.
Okay.
Here we are.
There it is. Perfect. But anyway, that person, the lender made me feel like this was a risky loan. And then my seller said, but if they only have, are not putting any money down, oh, that other one was the right one. That right there. Anyway, so I was like this, the agent got mad. Now we were looking at 3 or 4 offers and she said, well, you're prejudiced against the VA, a veteran. And I said, what do you mean I'm prejudiced against a veteran? You made an offer and it wasn't as good as another one. And yes, the VA loan has you asked for $500 for repairs. So it made your offer worth less. I mean, there might not be those. So anyway, she got really mad. I did not tell her what the lender said because I felt like he made a mistake. He shouldn't have let it go. But we were worried that with 100% down, if there was $2,000 worth of repairs, they might not have moved forward. So, that also factored in, but it was mainly his price and the fact that the lender said it was iffy. So you're just looking at that. That's why FHA and VA, they're good loans. They're fantastic loans, but they come with a few red tape or stipulations that are a little different than conventional. That's why some sellers are nervous about them, but they're normally very good loans. So the counter offer, you put in a time that you're making it at the top and the date you're making it. And then you fill in the date of the original offer and then the address and so forth. Okay, this is the most confusing form I believe we have, and I haven't looked at, they've changed anything, but if you go down to E, paragraph E. So, okay, so you have an offer, and the best way that the brokers like is for you to do a counter offer because it shows what happened. Some people used to do what we called a clean contract, where you take all the counters or the counter and the offer and try to put it all together, but there's a chance for somebody to make a mistake, like to do a typo. So that's why they like the counter offer form. Now, paragraph E says the sections not filled in or marked NC for no change mean that you accept what was in the original offer. Here's where I say it's not about us and our egos. If that other agent just wants me to put in the closing costs, even though we aren't changing them, we're agreeing to the 5,000, but they want a 5,000 in that closing cost line, I'm going to do it for them. Even though paragraph E says, if I don't change it, it stays the same, because the buyers want to see that number there. So do what you think is best, but technically all you're changing in the counter is what you are not agreeing to. So if you're changing the price, which is normally the main thing, you put the price, purchase price of property. Closing costs, if you're changing that, and like I said, a lot of buyers still want to see that number there if they're getting any. So you might have to put it there anyway, but you don't have to legally. Closing and possession, that's where only if you're changing it. And here, closing and possession, if you're adding, if they said they want possession at closing, and you're countering that you want 2 days, you're going to have to do that temporary occupancy agreement with your counter. See what I'm saying? If you're changing it. Holder of the earnest money, if you are not changing it, technically you can put in, I either put NC or I leave it blank. It depends. Some of the fields in DocuSign, if it's a dollar field, it can't accept NC there because it's looking for numbers. So it just depends what I'm changing. I just want to make it as clear as possible. You might change the inspection or due diligence period up or down in a counter situation. And then you put a different time limit. So the new time limit, whatever your party, whichever side you're doing. And then you have this next page F, which is other modifications. And that's where, so you could say, okay, one I'm always doing, the buyer asks for a termite bond for 1 year repair retreat, 1 year from closing. And my seller has a termite bond that's good for 6 months after closing. And we're just going to transfer. So I might say special stipulation number 1 is replaced with, and I write the words. Or they ask for a home warranty, but they don't put a cap on it. And you might say the home warranty referred to in stipulation 2 is capped at $580 or whatever. So you can change any stipulation or add your own there. And then if you keep going, and then we'll go back over anything, you have to fill this in, the counter offer the same time. I've never found a program that auto fills that. Maybe there are a few that do, but I always have to remember to do that. You again fill in the information you have on sellers and buyers and agents. And then at the very bottom is the binding agreement date. If this is the binding counter offer, somebody fills that in. So let's talk about that a little bit. So you counter, okay, you present an offer, then the listing agent sends you back a counter, and you might go back and forth a couple of times. The final contract is the original offer and the final counter. None of the others in the middle mean anything. So if I change the wording about the termite bond to I'm transferring the current one and it's only for 9 months instead of 12, but it didn't end up in the final contract because it was in my counter, but then they didn't keep it, I'm going to owe a 12-month, or the seller's going to owe a 12-month bond. So you just have to make sure that the final counter and your offer are what everybody really wants. And then the last person to sign what's agreed on, finally, you go back and forth. I hate to go back and forth much more than 2 or 3 times. People start getting testy. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen sometimes, back and forth, back and forth. But anyway, so you finally agree. So my party agrees. So I'm going to send it to you, Jennifer, let's say, and then you're going to typically you're going to fill in the binding agreement, because you've got to tell, let's say you're the buyer's agent, you've got to tell the buyer that the seller accepted the last counter. Now, sometimes people are out showing and I'll say, hey, since we're all in agreement and everybody's talked about it, and do you want me to fill in the binding agreement for you because you're showing and you're not going to get home till 10 o'clock? And I'll ask them because I know a circumstance, but normally they're supposed to do it. The last person that says yes, the person that found out that it was a yes is supposed to fill it out. But again, you can ask each other, just because I'm on the computer now, would you like me to fill it out for you, or fill it out and I'll sign my name? And they sometimes will say, oh, thank goodness, yes, please do. So you can do that, but you need that binding agreement filled in. And then you're off to the races of inspections. But let's talk about questions about counters and how to handle situations.
Do you ever get to a point where it's going back and forth so much that it's hard to keep track of where you're at what's the last standing and, how to present that to your seller or buyer?
Well, that's why you need to keep some notes, but also remember those in between counters don't matter anymore. You just have to look at the last one. And then maybe you go through your counters to be sure that everything you wanted is in there. I am kind of known for a dog with a bone. I don't like to let things die, or I don't like to, like today I made a call to somebody that made an offer on my listing in November. And they keep circling around saying, will we take this amount of money? And my seller to this point has not wanted to take it. So I called again today and I said, have you found anything? No, now we're having verbal conversations. Nothing is legal verbally, but I'm just having a conversation trying to start another offer or, present them. I'm having a conversation because, just trying to start it up. But even if they called me and said, okay, we'll come up 5,000, that means nothing until it's signed. So you can have conversations to try to help people move along, because it's like, this has been a month and they've been circling and they call me to ask me if we're still available. And, maybe we'll get these two together. But normally, or sometimes I had a negotiation and I don't know, we went back and forth. And again, I'll have some verbal conversations just to try to, I'll say, you're an agent, I'm an agent. What can we do together? Do you, and you can have some conversations, but understand it's not legal until it's written down and signed by everybody. And whatever's in that final counter and that original offer that wasn't changed by the counter is what you agree to. I actually put together the counter offer and the original offer and call it complete binding agreement. And that's what I send to the attorney. I don't want them to get separated. I did have an appraisal where it was a really weird appraisal service out of another state. I will run when I hear of them again. But anyway, they did not have the counter and it was all attached. So I don't know how they disattached it, or she just didn't know what she was reading. And so she actually appraised it for exactly what the original offer was. So we all knew that it was wrong. I mean, like, even the buyer, because they didn't really have, she just was shooting at the number she thought she had to. So I do always make it one document so it's not lost. And with the counters, some people like to wait a day or two. I like to kind of keep things going. And I do tell buyers and sellers, I try to stop talking, after 7, let's say, or, or after 6 or whatever, unless we're negotiating. If we are so close, and that's why I try to do my time limits earlier in the day, but I do try to, I've been on the phone late. If someone's on a roll and we're almost there and, or bidding wars or whatever, I'll say, I'll talk late if we're really negotiating actively and we're almost there. Kind of give them that idea. What other questions on counter offers? And then we'll talk about anything else.
How would you address an offer if they don't counter and they just decline your offer altogether, and then you find out after the fact that it was something that probably could have been negotiated? What do you do then? Do you just accept the declination, or do you try to still work it out some kind of way and see if they will still counter you or consider countering you?
I really still try to work it out to see what was wrong or what made them do that. If I'm in a multi-contract and we lose, I do try to find out if I can. You can't always in a multi-contract, was there anything about our offer to let the buyer learn. But yeah, I'll call the agent, and some agents don't like to talk on the phone. So sometimes it's a simple, can you call me? I have an update. and you know, maybe that'll get them to call you, and the update might be, my buyer is still really interested. Is there anything, you know, you would suggest in making, and you can always make another offer. So if they were low ball or something and the seller was insulted, you can make a low ball. I do always laugh because they say that the seller never forgets the original offer. I mean, they're always, that's that person that offered me that low ball. It's true. They do always remember that. It'll come up. Any other questions on this so far? So the biggest thing is to remember, again, you're trying to get two people that are on opposite sides of what wants to happen together. And the only thing you can be assured of, let me see if there's anything in the chat here. The only thing you can be assured of during the inspection is the buyer is convinced they paid too much and the seller is convinced they sold it for too little. And so that, you know, you're going to almost be talking about this contract the whole time. Because they'll be like, well, you know, the seller, I had to come up higher than I wanted to. Or the seller, I'll get to that in a second. The seller, you know, is like, well, you know, I came down lower. So you just have to keep going, yes, yes, yes. And Stacy always makes fun of this, but I don't know where I got it. Sometimes you don't want to agree with them.
I know.
I know. And I literally have a habit now. I'll just go, I know. I know. I know. And I don't know why. It's not saying, yes, I agree with you. It's not, you know, some of your sellers or your buyers are being ridiculous or they're just emotional. You have to remember, this is an emotional time and it's not about you. I had somebody, I mean, I just had all kinds of things said to me, and I understand that it's in the emotion of the moment and they're just mad about, you know, whatever, not getting their way. So for some reason, and Stacy does it all, I do say, I know, and it just lets them, you heard them, you're not agreeing. And then you just say, well, okay, but do you want the house? And you can decide. I had one.
This is where the therapist hat comes in.
That's where the therapist hat comes in. The one that's closing tomorrow, just because it's fresh on the seller refused to fix anything. And we'd gotten a pretty good negotiation and we'd gotten a pretty good bunch of closing costs. And the seller said, you use that, that's it. I'm not doing anything else. And I just finally realized that we're not getting anything out of the seller. And no matter what kind of son of a gun he is or whatever we think, I just finally said, look, let's stop the emotion. We've gotten prices on everything, or more or less. We got prices on everything. You know what it's going to cost you. And of course, it'll be more than that, or something will break the day after closing or whatever. I'd always try to joke about that. But you need to decide if you want this house. So just take a deep breath. Let's not talk about it anymore. Let's talk in the morning. Do you want this house? And how does it feel if you don't get, if you are in the driver's seat? You can terminate or you can buy your house, and you've got to decide. And okay. Someone was asking, let me see. So that's just, you're just talking them off the ledge, I call it. Okay, if you're the selling agent, do we collect the earnest money from our client before an accepted offer? If I'm physically with them, I might get the check. But as I told you, if you check on page 1 of the contract that you have the earnest money, it has to be at your office to say that. Otherwise, I say it, otherwise I just say I'll get it in 2 days or 1 day or 3 days or 5 days, whatever I want to put. In this crazy market, if you're representing the seller, what do you think of option money versus earnest money? I've never really used option money. I've never had a buyer that would do it. You could use it. I guess I could see it maybe in multi-contract, where that is earnest money. It's not, it's hard. You're just giving them the money. You could do that. That might be a good strategy if they really, really, really want the house. But you have to explain to them that money is gone. And some buyers will do it. It's just like you can say it is not contingent on the loan, even though they're getting a loan. You can say that and they can take that risk, and you can use a cash exhibit and say they're allowed to get a loan, but it puts the onus on them. They know they can get that loan. They've done all the homework. I mean, so you can do it. And if the buyer's comfortable with that, because you don't have to have a contingency just because you need it. You would just putting your earnest money on the line, similar to option money. Anthony's asking about negotiation tips. So my biggest tip is just put your ego to the side. It's not about you. I'll say that to the seller when they, or the other agent, whoever they are, I'll just say, you know what? And I compliment the other agent a lot. I'll tell them to have a good weekend. I mean, this sounds silly, but it's true. People are kind of get in combative mode sometimes, and it's my nature. So it's easy, but it's not a manipulation, but it makes someone feel better. If you just say, hey, I know this is tough. We've got 2 people. I love your people to have this house. The one I called today, I said, I just can't stop thinking about them. We've had some other people sniffing around, but, do you want to talk to them again? My seller kind of knows where she wants to go now. So she has told me to call you. She has told me she's more negotiable. Let's try to put this together. So my biggest tip is keep looking for the ways you can make it work. Keep looking, for where you can help by putting people together. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else for sure we have to cover. Let's think. Oh, be sure earnest money is very important to turn in on time. And in order for your office to process it, you probably have to do whatever they call the thing that used to be the green sheet. I forget what, in command.
Commissions in command. Commissions
in command. There you go. So you got to be sure that that's set up for them to be able to process that earnest money. But you got to get that turned in. If for some reason you don't, you have to tell the other side you don't have it. If it gets to that, which it shouldn't.
Or your MCA will have to call the listing agent, and the seller has the right to terminate immediately.
Right.
So you lose the house.
Yeah. Another tip I would tell you, and I do a lot, I tell the person, I send them an email, both buyers and sellers. I try, because they're not hearing everything. They hear it, but they don't remember it. So just know that you do this every day, and just keep reminding them or telling them, and you will get, I guess the best thing to know is the hardest transactions will be the most loyal clients, unless that one, who, that's just not someone you want to deal with anymore. But you'll have maybe one bad client that's just impossible. But when you're going through a hard time or a negotiation, it's easier as you do it longer and longer. Everything would bother me. And, what could I have done differently? But the more that goes on and the things that happen, they will be so loyal to you because of how hard you worked. So when you're working hard, remember that. And when everything's going so smoothly, I start to worry. Like there was nothing on the inspection. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? Kind of thing. So just know that the buyers will appreciate, and the sellers will appreciate you when there is stress. When there is. Another negotiating tip I just thought about when you're working with sellers, and buyers, you can have family members, helpful neighbors that know more than you do about real estate, that are filling their heads with information. And you just have to say, like with sellers, they'll say, well, my friends all love my wallpaper. And I just have to calmly say, well, that's great. And I love your wallpaper. But guess what? I'm not in the market to buy your house because I'm downsizing and you're, whatever. Your house is like my house. I'm going to probably get a smaller one sometime. So you kind of say, are they really buying, or are we trying to appeal to the buyers? Or if they say, oh, everybody says I sold too low. Well, first of all, you shouldn't be telling everybody what you're selling the house for. But second of all, nobody knows what another house really went for, because there could have been a lot of repairs. And like when they say, oh, my neighbor sold for so much more, you just have to say, well, look, we're working on your offer. You just have to just keep listening, but keep pushing them through, keep walking them through. This is the offer we have. Do we want to accept it? So just keep talking and keep being soothing to them. The other thing, I guess, another tip I have is, if they're getting real excited and very emotional, whether it's the other agent, the other, the seller, the buyer, whoever you're working with, if they get real excitable, then you get calmer. You get I talk in almost a monotone. I just like, okay, let's calm down and look at this, just really try, again, the therapy hat. You're just trying to get them to calm down enough to make a good decision. So you just get really calm. Don't get excited with them. And then if they're really calm, you might get a little more emotional. Like if they're like, well, I'm just not going to do this, I'm done. And you might say, what are you going to do if someone else buys the house tomorrow? Let's talk about, why did you like it? And you might get more emotional or talk more about their emotion. Again, you're not trying to manipulate anybody. You're trying to help them not hurt themselves by making, knee-jerk emotional reaction. You just share with them the information, like the girl that had to buy the house as is. I just said, just stop, just take 12 hours and just think about it and make a decision for yourself that, and she's thanked me a million times because I calmed her down and let her think. That's what you're there for. Other questions? I'm real excited. Oh, somebody had something. Let me see. I'm real excited for y'all. This is a great business. It's crazy, but it's wonderful. The best thing in the world is when you have a repeat client, because you can't, it's just so neat when somebody remembers you and calls you back. You catch more bees with honey. Absolutely, Selena.
Okay, Elise, your question about
the
earnest money. On the settlement statement, it will show as effectively a payment towards the purchase price. It rolls in, it's kind of like your down payment. I mean, it's part of your down payment. So
yeah, so let's use the example. The house is $400,000. The seller's paying $5,000 in closing costs. So that's a credit. The price is 400 minus 5. And then let's say the earnest money is $4,000, 1%. So then it would be minus 4,000. And then it would be minus whatever the loan is. And then that's what the buyer would come to closing with. Does that make sense? So you take it, it's a credit towards what they owe at closing.
So I don't want necessarily going like a principal or interest or anything. It's just coming off of them to basically ask for a loan for a lower amount.
Yeah. So let's say they're putting down 10% because it's easy. So, well, no, what $40,000 on a 400,000. So 10%. So they're going to pay $40,000 and then the loans for $360,000. So they know that up front. But what the lender doesn't know until they get the contract is, so we're going to get $5,000 from the seller. So that would be, so they owe $40,000. That's including closing costs. Well, let's say they owe 40,000 and maybe they owe another 7 in closing costs. You know, that they would know up front from the lender. So all that, so they owe 400 plus 7,000 in closing costs. So then you're going to take off your earnest money and you're going to take off anything the seller's giving you. So they're not going to actually have to, so they've already got that 4,000 earnest money. So that if you just use the 4,000, you'd have 36,000 left of the 40. So they're really putting 40 down. It's just they gave 4 up front as earnest money.
That's it. That's
Okay.
it. It is 8:38. Why don't we take our beauty shots and we can call it a night unless Arje has anything else?
No, I'm excited for everyone. Go get some clients and write some offers. And I hate that we're not all together.
All right, give me a second.
And you're very welcome. I've enjoyed y'all, and like I said, it kills me not to be in the room.
Arje, did you know that Clax was spying on you?
I saw John Damiano and Clax, and I want to know what they're doing.
Those little weasels. Now they have 3 agents that they're going to be mentoring.
Yep. Me and Donnie and Candace.
Yeah, they're spying on us.
Yeah, so
they're
for everyone else, these 2 agents that have been around my office for years brought offers on my listings are sending me messages or making comments. And I'm like, what are you doing? Just trying to rattle me, I know. Well, I wish you guys a wonderful December. And I wish you all the luck in the world. It's not luck. It's really just picking up that phone and making phone calls and starting to get clients. Think of it as you are helping people and you have knowledge that they want. And you can't go to as many parties right now, but this is a huge time to just be calling people to say, you know, Happy New Year, happy end of the year. Hope you're okay with COVID. It's the perfect time to call people. So do and enjoy it all. Make it fun. Make it fun. Somebody's asking me for something, but anyway.
I think they want your email address.
Oh, okay.
If you would type, can you type that in there?
Yeah, I don't know why it's telling me. Oh, everyone, here we go. And I hope to meet all of you somewhere or over a contract.
Woohoo! All right. Thanks, gang. We're barreling towards the finish line. I will see you again Saturday afternoon for the test.
Oh, you guys are almost done.
Yep.
All right. Well, good luck, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Yeah.
Bye, Stacy.
Bye, Arje. Bye, Clax. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.